Hi loves, just to let you know, this is a compilation video of my two Beckham videos from my main channel, Coffee and Colts. And in this video, we go over all of the Beckham feud drama. The first part of the video was made before the whole thing was made public, when there was a lot of speculation about what was going on. And then the second half is after Brooklyn put out his Instagram stories and all of the information started spilling out into the mainstream. So it goes over the entire saga, and in the description box, I'll leave a link to all of the sources, my main channel, and social media, all of that stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the video. Bye, guys. Today, we're going to be taking a look behind the scenes of one of England's most famous families, the Beckhams. We're going to discuss every Beckham story over the last almost 4 decades, along with every secret they've wanted to keep under wraps. From David's headline-making alleged affairs to the claims that things aren't as perfect as the Beckhams want you to believe, as well as the story that David and Victoria are desperately trying to bury right now, their family feud. David and Victoria's oldest son, Brooklyn Beckham, and his wife, Nicole Peltz, are fighting with David, Victoria, and the other Beckham children, and the feud has blown up over the summer when Brooklyn and Nicola fully separated themselves from the Beckhams and made it clear they weren't welcome in their lives. Nicola, who's the daughter of a billionaire, married Brooklyn 3 years ago, and there have been nothing but problems between Victoria and Nicola ever since. Finally, we'll also cover how David and Victoria and Brooklyn and Nicola have been using the paparazzi and media against one another, and how one side has been leaking family secrets to hurt the other. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's dive in to the secrets, lies, affairs, allegations, and feuds of England's most famous celebrity family, the Beckhams. David and Victoria Beckham are some of the most beloved British celebrities of all time, and while they have had their ups and downs, they have carefully treaded the line of keeping a lot of their private lives behind closed doors, but sharing enough with their fans and the public that people have a fondness for them and also see them as down-to-earth and relatable, despite being mega rich and famous for almost 40 years. Although the Beckhams are generally beloved, they have had their share of public scandals over the last 40 years. They've had everything from alleged affairs to Scientology spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to recruit them multiple times, leaks emails that exposed when David Beckham blew up about the royal family, there's an alleged feud with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and there's even multiple tax scandals. They really have had a colorful history in the public eye, and their latest scandal is their feud with their oldest son, Brooklyn Beckham, and his wife, Nicole, whose father is a controversial billionaire. And although the feud has been building for over 2 years, in the last few months, it's been bubbling to the surface as Brooklyn and Nicola have used Nicola's father's money to not only allegedly hire Harry and Meghan's lawyer, an interesting move as David and Victoria had a pretty well-documented fallout with Harry and Meghan, but Brooklyn and Nicola have also hired Harvey Weinstein's former PR master. Brooklyn and Nicola hired Weinstein's former publicist, Matthew Heldzink, who is known in Hollywood as an attack dog, the go-to crisis management specialist, and a PR guru. They hired him in June of this year, and he certainly has been hard at work over the last 3.5 months. If you follow any sort of celebrity content, you may have noticed over the summer the wall-to-wall coverage of Brooklyn and Nicola, despite the fact that neither of them really warrants really any coverage, never mind this insane level of coverage. They've been on magazine covers, had countless photo shoots, endless interviews and articles, and it's all really about nothing because it's not like they have a movie to promote, a photography book that's going to come out, a TV show. there's just really nothing. There also has been an avalanche of negative coverage about David and Victoria, and even though Brooklyn and Nicola only got married 3 years ago, they also have had a very publicized vow renewal over the summer. The vow renewal seemed to be sending a strong message through the media about Brooklyn's estrangement from his family, as the vow renewal was officiated by Nicola's billionaire father. Nicola's family were all there, and it was all over social media and pictures and all in all types of media coverage, but none of Brooklyn's family were even invited. Not his parents, his brothers, his sister, grandparents, aunts, no one. There is so much to dive into with this feud because I've had some very interesting details told to me about specifically what Brooklyn and Nicola are doing PR-wise and with the press. And this story is just fascinating to look at into how a lot of this PR stuff works behind the scenes. But I've also had some very interesting stories about the Beckhams behind the scenes and what some people who worked for them said they were really like behind the scenes, and allegedly what David Beckham spilled behind closed doors to someone in a very intimate setting. So before we get into the family feud, I want to lay out a little bit of the history about David and Victoria Beckham, and more so their individual rises to fame in the 90s, as because they've been famous for so long, a lot of their early days gets glossed over, and I think it's very important context for the type of people they are today and how they conduct themselves with the media now, and really how they always have. David and Victoria both became megastars individually in the mid-90s, but when they became a couple, they ascended to global superstardom. They were both two hugely famous individuals, but when they got together, they not only were one of the first mega celebrity couples, but they also became one of the first celebrity couple brands whose relationship was a selling point of their brand. David, from the very start of his career, did things very differently from footballers before him. He was at the forefront of celebrity brand deals. He became the footballer that kids wanted to be like off the pitch and on the pitch. He was one of the first footballers to have his post-football career eclipse his time as a player, which I can't really think of anyone else that did that before him. And Victoria was not only part of one of the first megastar girl groups, but also one of the first in the music industry to have a second huge career in the fashion industry. And while there were celebrity couples before the Beckhams and celebrity brands, David and Victoria really were one of the first celebrity couples and individuals who brought being a brand to a whole new level. And what's super unique about them is that they both became more famous after they retired from their original careers as a pop star and a footballer, which is wild when you think about it, because it isn't like they were just, and I don't mean like, oh, just a famous footballer and just a famous singer. Like, David Beckham is one of the most famous footballers of all time. His career in the 90s and 2000s, it was so huge. And as I said, Victoria was a member of one of the most successful music groups of all time. They are the most successful girl group of all time and have sold over 100 million records. Of course, the group being the Spice Girls. 100 million records is an insane number for the 90s, but thinking about that today, I mean, people today, 20 million is an insane number. So thinking about how successful the Spice Girls were, and in such a short time too, like they basically had their 2 albums come out just over a year in between each other. I will keep it brief with the history of the Spice Girls because my audience is like 75-80% women, and the vast majority of those women are between 30 and 45. So I'm guessing everyone is pretty up to date on their Spice Girls lore. The Spice Girls was formed in 1994 by a father and son duo, Bob and Chris Herbert, who wanted to make a girl group to compete against the slew of boy bands that were dominating pop at this time. They placed an ad in the newspapers in February 1994, and there was almost 3 other members of the Spice Girls at one point, different from obviously the 5 members that were the Spice Girls. At one point, there was a member called Michelle Stevenson, who was the original member before Emma Bunton came, and there was another Mel C at one point that the Mel C that we all know actually replaced her. But after some false starts and a couple of member swaps, they ended up with the final selection in 1994 of Mel B, Victoria Adams, Jerry Halliwell, Mel C, and Emma Bunton. And with those 5, the band Touch was born. Throughout 94, the 5 girls lived in a 3-bedroom house in London and worked on their music together. But by the end of 94, the band still didn't have an official contract with Bob and Chris and their management group, Heart Management. In December of 94, the group persuaded the Herberts to let them do a showcase for producers and writers in the industry. And they performed at Nobis Studios, where they received a massive reaction. When the Herberts saw how positively people were reacting to the group, they then decided that they were highly motivated to produce a contract and get all 5 of the band to sign it. But upon seeing this contract and showing it to Victoria's father for some legal advice, all of the members refused to sign it. After they refused to sign the contract, they began looking for other representation. And by this stage, they had actually changed their name from Touch to Spice, as when they were working on their music throughout 94, there was a couple of songwriters that they'd worked with who insisted that they learn to write their own songs. And one of the first songs that they wrote, the 5 of them together, was called Sugar and Spice, and that prompted them to change the name to Spice. They ended up changing the name to the Spice Girls as there was a rapper with the name Spice at the time, and people in the industry had started referring to them as those Spice Girls, so they picked that name. It did end up fitting them very well because the original ad that they all saw for the audition for the group talked about 5 distinctly different girls. So when they started being known as the Spice Girls, they would say they each brought a different spice to the group. And I also like how they took the girls label and kind of turned it around, because the mid-90s obviously was a very different place for women, especially women in the music industry. And then they had the whole girl power thing, which a lot of people, including little 90s me, loved. The nicknames that they would eventually all go by, Jerry, Sporty, Posh, Scary, and Baby, were actually chosen by a kid for a magazine competition. And this sort of thing, like 5 random girls answering an ad in a paper, picking their name from their own writing, and then a kid picking their nicknames. I mean, you'd never see this today. Everything is so produced with marketing people and PR and focus tested. And I think that is an element of why the Spice Girls were so insanely popular, because they really came across as real and genuine and incredibly authentic. I mean, if you see them in interviews, even when they were already famous and doing a world tour, they had this realness about them that I just don't think would ever happen today, because everything is so manufactured and polished, and a lot of that is with social media and people recording everything and famous people being aware that people are recording at all times. I just don't think that you ever would really see anything like them again. By March 95, they left Heart Management and they actually allegedly stole their own master's recordings so that they could stay in control of their work, as by this stage, they'd written a number of their future hits, including Wannabe and To Become One. They started putting out demo tapes, which caught the attention of Simon Fuller, who signed them in May 1995, and after a bidding war in July 95, they signed a 5-album deal with Virgin Records. On July 8th, 1996, they finally released their first debut single, Wannabe, in the UK, and from that point on, it was just pretty much world domination for the Spice Girls. Wannabe spent 7 weeks at #1 in the UK, and this was when it was a huge deal who was #1. And of course, we didn't have streaming. You had to physically go and buy the tape or the CD or record it off the radio. I'm sure everyone who's my age, a few years younger and a few years older, or everybody who's older, can remember going into places like Woolworths and Sam Goody and buying a new single on a Saturday. Wannabe hit #1 in 37 countries, including 4 weeks at #1 in the US, which was huge for a British band, especially a UK girl group. Wannabe became not only the best-selling debut single by an all-female group, but also the best-selling single by an all-female group of all time. It was just after Wannabe was released that the article in Top of the Pops that I mentioned where they got their nicknames came out, and so pretty much after Wannabe is when they were starting to be known by their nicknames. And from pretty much the end of 96 onward, they started to really be known by those nicknames more than their actual real names. In October 96, they released Say You'll Be There, and it also became #1. In November 96, they released their first album, Spice, which ended up selling 3 million copies just in the UK alone, becoming the best-selling album of all time by a female group. It also was the fastest-selling album since the Beatles. It went platinum 10 times and spent 15 weeks at #1. And then just to cap the year off at an absolute peak, the next month in December 96, they closed out the year with To Become One becoming the Christmas #1. Again, something that was a huge deal in the 90s and early 2000s. That Christmas in 96, the Spice Girls also switched on the Christmas lights in Oxford Street, London, to a crowd of 500,000 people. They signed multi-million-dollar sponsorship deals at the end of the year with Walker's Crisps, Cadbury Chocolate, Polaroid, Pepsi, and Impulse deodorant, and I had all of those Spice Girls products. In January 97, they dominated the US when Wannabe was released, and it reached #1 for 4 weeks, as I mentioned. And the following month, in February 97, they released their album Spice in the US. It also hit #1 and sold over 7.4 million copies, becoming the best-selling album of 1997. The same month is when they opened the Brit Awards with Who Do You Think You Are? And that's when Jerry wore her iconic Union Jack dress. And from that point on, it was even bigger Spice Mania, because this was them absolutely taking over the US, something that was nearly impossible for British bands to do, especially at that time. In the summer of 97, they filmed their absolute masterpiece, the movie Spice World, and by the end of the year, they started releasing singles from their second album, also called Spice World, and in November, they released the Spice World album. Again, records broken, awards won, 14 million copies sold. Absolute insanity, especially wild considering they only released their first album Spice in 96, and just over a year and a bit later they're releasing their second album. never would happen today. The following year in 1998, they started their world tour, but we'll put a tiny pause here to quickly catch up on where David Beckham is history-wise prior to Victoria, because they actually met in 97. So while this is going on with the Spice Girls, this is when they met, when they were at their absolute just top of their rise. And they actually ended up, David and Victoria, meeting because Mel C took Victoria to a football game. And David had already had a crush on Victoria because, as I've said, the Spice Girls were everywhere. And he and a teammate, Gary Neville, were actually watching TV when the Spice Girls came on. And David said to Gary, "I'm going to marry that one," and pointed to Victoria. So after David had played this game that Mel C and Victoria were at, he was asked if he wanted to meet some of the Spice Girls who were attending the game. And he quickly asked which ones were there and was excited to hear that one of the ones that was there was Victoria. Mel C really wasn't impressed because she's from Liverpool, she's a Scouser, and she supports Liverpool football team. And Liverpool and Manchester United, who David Beckham played for, have a huge rivalry. I cannot really explain it in any way outside of the UK. Like, usually I can come up with a American equivalent like straight away, but I don't know whether it's because the UK is smaller and there's not as many teams or what, but there just isn't the same sort of rivalry. This is just on a totally other level. And David Beckham actually grew up as a Manchester United fan. There's a documentary called Beckham on Netflix where it's all about David's childhood and him becoming a player and all his football career and everything like that. It's really good. It's actually produced and directed by Fisher Stevens, who is Hugo in Succession. So that is a totally random fact. But when David Beckham was growing up, his dad was like die-hard Manchester United fan, and that's very much what my dad is. My dad is die-hard Manchester United. And even though I'm not someone who would go and like turn on a football game, I'm really not like into it. But when I was growing up, my dad took me to all the games. I played football. My brother's 15 years younger than me, so I was his son before he had a son. And it just is one of those things that even today, like my nephews, they are Liverpool fans because they live in Liverpool. My brother-in-law is a Liverpool fan, the only thing my dad doesn't like about him. And it kills me to go and buy them Liverpool shirts. And I'm not even a football person. So like that is how deep this kind of rivalry is between these two teams. When David and Victoria met in 1997, David Beckham was already a pretty big star for Manchester United, and Manchester United is a really big team too. David Beckham actually signed to Man United, their youth team, in 1991. They signed these kids like really young, like 13, 14, and he started playing professionally in 1993 when he was only 17. He was extremely talented as a kid, but became especially known for how he could bend balls in ways that other players couldn't. His dad actually became concerned when he was younger because he was quite small and started giving him a pint of Guinness and a raw egg. David made his Premier League debut for United in 1995 at 19 years old, and the following season in 96-97 he became a household name when he scored an insane goal against Wimbledon. This, of course, was way before social media, but everyone was talking about this goal. It was on all of the match of the days. It was even on the news because he literally scored from his own half. Just before the halfway line, he absolutely boots the ball and it goes straight into the goal. And this was voted as like one of the top sporting moments countless times. And so from that point, when he was 19, he was just known as a huge, huge star. And when this was happening, Manchester United really was entering a golden era too, where they just started winning everything. Although David was a big star when he met Victoria, the first year that they were together, he just went to a complete another level, because the 97-98 season for Manchester United, they did pretty much the impossible. They ended up winning the treble, which is the Premier League, the FA Cup, and the Champions League. And I cannot overstate how huge this was. And it wasn't done again until like 2 or 3 years ago when Manchester City won the treble in the 2022-2023 season. So in 1998, David Beckham had done something that is practically unheard of. He also was playing on the England team by this stage, and he not only was on the England squad, but he was on the England squad for the 1998 World Cup. Also, by 1998, David and Victoria had gotten engaged, even though they hadn't really been together that long. And as I said, he was an enormous football star. He'd come off this insane season, and Victoria is in the biggest girl group in the world. The press attention around them was absolutely insane. And they also were these new kinds of celebrities where their relationship was also part of their brand and their appeal, which, especially when it came to David Beckham, this wasn't really done by footballers prior to him. It was very much, and this was something that Manchester United didn't actually like, that Victoria had her own career and had her own fame too, because with a lot of the footballers, they want them to have a wife that's just dedicated to being a footballer's wife. The Manchester United manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, and honestly a lot of football club managers want their football players to have a wife and a family and kind of go that home life route rather than the partying route. And that's because they believe that that helps them stay focused more on the football than everything else that comes with being a footballer and the fame and the money. And again, this is the 90s, so Alex Ferguson and a lot of people at Manchester United weren't fans of Victoria Beckham. And in the Beckham documentary on Netflix, they interview everyone pretty much for this documentary. A lot of David Beckham's fellow players on the Man United team at the time, Alex Ferguson, and just tons of other people associated with the club. And they all talk about David driving 4 hours to see Victoria for 40 minutes because both their schedules, as I was just saying, is so hectic at this time. David did seem to be 100% smitten with Victoria, and he also was someone not into the whole nightclub scene. In the documentary, they set up a lot of the comments and clips from around this time in the late 90s about the fellow players and his friends and his family saying how they were concerned that his, not, I don't want to say infatuation in a bad way, but obviously they were young, they were in love, and he was very focused on Victoria. And so a lot of his family and friends were worried, along with obviously Manchester United that's paying him millions of dollars, that he would become distracted and that he wouldn't be spending the time he should and not as focused on his career at Manchester United. They also, a lot of his fellow players talked about how they would be, going, and a lot of the time the football players stay in a hotel the night before. And his friend Gary Neville was saying, at 3 a.m., he'd be in the bathroom on the phone to Victoria. And in the documentary, they kind of set all this up as if to be like, oh, then his career took this huge nosedive. But really, and they do say this in the documentary too, that it didn't affect his career at all. And if anything, he went on to even more success, because when he and Victoria started going out, that was not too long before he was selected for the England squad. And in case you don't know too much about football or soccer, there's only 22 players selected for the England team, and there's only 11 of them that are starters. And Beckham was not only on the team a starter, but he was one of the stars of the entire England squad for years and years. He did actually even go on to captain England, and he ended up being the captain for England 59 times out of his 115 appearances. And that's the fourth highest amount of captaincies for any player in England's history. And his 115 appearances is the second most that anyone in history has played for England. And there is a bit more about his play for England that I will just touch on very briefly later. During this World Cup in 1998 in France, he was actually benched for a few games, but that was more to do with the English manager at the time, Glenn Hoddle, and his personal issues with Beckham. And some of those had to do with Victoria and him wanting to be able to spend time with her and speak to her, because all of the other players, they were having the World Cup in France. All of them had their wives and their family and their support systems with them, and they're there for months. And David obviously didn't have Victoria there because she's on tour in the US at this stage. David Beckham does describe the 1998 World Cup as changing his life, but not in a good way, as he went through the 90s version of cancellation after this World Cup. He was actually given a red card in one of the semifinals for clipping another player being sent off at this crucial match. And whenever a player is sent off for a red card, it means that the team plays one player down. So instead of having 11 players on the pitch, they only have 10. And as I explained before, people in the UK are absolutely fucking nuts about football. And a lot of them are very, very sure every year that England is going to win the World Cup or the Euros. And so David being taken out and being one of the stars, a lot of people thought that David Beckham literally cost them the World Cup. And so this turned into a massive, massive deal. And Beckham was really, really hated for a long time after the World Cup. And a lot of people actually forget that, yes, Beckham was sent off, and who knows what would have happened between him being sent off and the end of the game. But the end of the game, it was a tie. So they actually ended up losing with penalties. And that is just the most typical England thing in the world. Normally, they will always be taken out of big tournaments on penalties. It's literally one team shoots 5 penalties, the other team shoots 5 penalties. And, if at the end of the 5 penalties, say both of them have 4, they then kind of go to sudden death, where it's just like, okay, we're going to shoot until someone's one up and then that's it. But the people at the time really saw David Beckham being taken out as him costing England the World Cup. And the manager of England also came out and blamed Beckham, which is really shitty, like no matter if it was true, but he basically was kind of using David Beckham as a scapegoat, and David Beckham got absolutely destroyed. I mean, this isn't just the way, people would get canceled now online with like social media and stuff. Like people literally at other football games would be screaming, booing him. When he was out, there'd be people like throwing shit. Like there was death threats. There was awful, awful things said and done to him, and also said about like Victoria.
Every football fan sang this song. Posh Spice takes it up the arse. Excuse my language, not very ladylike, but 75,000 people singing that.
Also, the night before this game, Victoria actually told David that she was pregnant with their son Brooklyn. So after England were knocked out of the World Cup, David Beckham then went and joined the Spice Girls for a bit of their tour. As I said, they were in the US by this stage. And this was also when the Spice Girls had gone through a huge thing as well, because Jerry had actually left the group halfway, well, not even halfway through the tour, and most of the US dates, and then all of the tour afterwards, Jerry wasn't there and she wasn't a part of the band anymore. I actually went to the opening night of their world tour. It was the first concert I went to ever. I think I was 10 and I went in Dublin. So I did get to see them when Jerry was still there. And I actually, like, the shirt is from their reunion tour in 2007, 2008. And whenever this tour came out, you had to do this, like, enter the kind of like this lottery for tickets. And I ended up getting tickets to LA and London. I went to the LA concert with my sisters, and then I went to the London one with my high school friends, and we all came over from the Isle of Man and went to the London one. And then in 2019, when they did their latest reunion tour, Victoria actually wasn't at that one, but in 2019, my dad got me tickets for my birthday to go and see the Spice Girls with all my high school friends. So we went to the Dublin show in 2019 and had like an amazing time. So I have really fond memories of seeing the Spice Girls, especially with a lot of my friends who I still have a lot of friends from high school or from boarding school from when I was 11. And it's just lots of good memories with the Spice Girls. So although David and Victoria were experiencing enormous heights at this point in their careers, they were also going through enormous difficulties, especially David with this amount of backlash that he was going through. David and Victoria did lean on each other a lot in this time, and in March 1999, Victoria gave birth to their first son, Brooklyn Beckham, and a lot of people falsely claim that he was named Brooklyn because that's where he was conceived, but that actually isn't true. It was kind of like a secondary thing that Victoria was actually in Brooklyn in New York whenever she told David that she was pregnant, but obviously he was at the World Cup. Victoria actually originally liked the name Brooke for a girl, and then she decided on Brooklyn for a boy. And as I said, it was just kind of that's kind of cool too, because I was in Brooklyn when I told him I was pregnant. And then David said that he thought it was kind of like a cool, like, Brooklyn Beckham name because he thought his son might end up being a footballer like him. David and Victoria also started getting lots of kidnapping threats around the birth, and they were absolutely hounded by the paparazzi for pictures of the baby because, of course, the paparazzi knew how much money these pictures would fetch. That summer in 1999, Posh and Becks also got married just outside Dublin, and a British magazine ended up paying £1 million, which at that time was close to $2 million for exclusive pictures of the wedding. And a lot of the magazine that ended up doing these exclusive pictures of the wedding, OK and Hello were usually the two that would do it in the UK. They would end up doing baby photo shoots and release like the first pictures of the kids that way too. There also are a lot of horrible clips of their kids scared in cars when the paparazzi's all around and like chasing them. There's a really horrible one in the documentary on Netflix where Brooklyn, I mean, he must be like 3, maybe a little bit younger, and he's like crying and they're telling him, don't worry, they can't get in the car, it's okay.
Right, Buster, they can't get in the car. Right, they can't get in the car.
The Beckhams have talked over the years about how much they worry about like that affecting their kids because not only the paparazzi, but as I said, there's been lots of threats against them. They do have paparazzi people that used to hound the Beckhams in the Netflix documentary, and they do get confronted by Fisher Stevens saying, like, did you never feel bad about doing this to literal children? And the paparazzis, of course, are like, oh, well, it was a different time, we wouldn't do that today, but It just infuriates me, especially with people's kids. I mean, it's one thing when it's the adults and, you know, a lot of celebrities, as I talk about a lot on the channel, more often than not, unless it's like a huge star like Britney Spears, or honestly, the Beckhams probably fall into this. A lot of celebrities, they're orchestrating their paparazzi shots, especially today. They all have relationships with photographers, and especially if you see, you know, Chance Crawford is like absolutely notorious for it, that he'll be walking down the street and have Buffalo Wild Wings, or, you know, a lot of celebrities, especially if you see some sort of product and it just happens that the label is turned right to face the camera. A lot of that stuff isn't only paparazzi and the celebrity like making a deal to, okay, come here and take these shots of me, but there's also brands involved in the whole thing too. And they'll actually be being paid to go and take these pictures with paparazzi. Again, today, especially, it's just so prevalent, especially people like Bradley Cooper, who is allegedly in a lot of orchestrated relationships. If he's on vacation in a random town in Utah, paparazzi aren't finding him there. Like, they are putting this all together, and that is just how a lot of this stuff works now. However, in the 90s it was different, because you did have the Beckhams at this really beginning stages of their massive fame, but also there were no rules or laws, or even people's opinion was very different about paparazzi and celebrities being hounded and kids being hounded. Today, people have a lot more empathy, especially towards celebrities' kids. And in the UK, there are also, thankfully, like laws and things now with celebrities' kids and kids in general, that they do have to, one, like most of the time, they are supposed to not be taking pictures of kids, but they can't sell them to magazines and newspapers and put them on social media in the same way. And they can't profit from it. So they've no interest in it. And you'll see, especially like a lot of British outlets, the kids' faces will be blurred and things like that. Although at the same time, what they do to kind of get around this is they will go and take the pictures of the kids. And yes, they will sell, you know, the celebrity picture for the actual celebrity to the British outlets, and then they'll go and sell them to the US outlets for like the kid, and then they won't blur the face because you don't have to in the US. So as I said, in March 1999, Brooklyn Beckham is born, and that summer they get married. And in December 1999, the Spice Girls do a small tour after their massive world tour, and they have had their 2 albums out within like 18 months. They had a movie, and they've had a bazillion other things going on. And they decided in December 1999 that they were going to slow things down, as not only did Jerry depart, as I said, midway through the tour in 98, but Victoria and Mel B had both had babies in 1999. The December 99 tour was in the UK only, and during this tour, they played songs from their upcoming 3rd album. The Spice Girls were still massively successful after Jerry left, but it wasn't quite to the same level. Well, it really wasn't to the same level. They did end up receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Brit Awards the following year in 2000. And in November of 2000, they did, sans Jerry, release their 3rd and final album titled Forever. Forever was very different from their first 2 albums, and while it still was successful, it was just not anywhere close to their previous albums. In December 2000, the Spice Girls stopped all promotional for their album and began an indefinite hiatus to concentrate on their solo careers, but they did assure fans that they were not splitting up. And for the next 7 years, we lived in a Spice Girls-less world. In 2001, Victoria signed on with Virgin Records, who the Spice Girls had their record deal with, and released her self-titled album. In September 2002, Victoria and David ended up having their second son, Romeo. And also in 2002, Victoria signed a contract worth $1.5 million with Telstar Records and 19 Management to bring about her next album after that first one. Victoria did release a single from this next album, but the album was actually never released officially. It did end up leaking online several years ago, but the album was never released because Telstar Records ended up going bankrupt. Victoria was frustrated by the wasted studio time, but this ended up being one of those things that seems awful when it happens, but it really was leading her to something much better, because her solo career was never going to be like this huge, massive thing, but she did go on to have a massive fashion career that she wanted to focus on after the palaver with Telstar Records. During the first half of the 2000s, Victoria did a lot of modeling and represented a lot of high-end brands, and in 2004, she ended up releasing high-end jeans that were incredibly successful, and from that point on, she became very involved in the fashion world, doing things like styling her friend Katie Holmes, and she was the face of even more brands through the 2000s, eventually launching her own denim line, DVB Style, and then she ended up opening her own official website to promote all of her fashion work, dvbstyle.com. During the first half of the 2000s, while Victoria was moving into the fashion world, David and Victoria had also moved to Spain in 2003 after David signed a 4-year contract to play for Real Madrid. There was a bit of a fallout with David and the manager at Manchester United, Alex Ferguson, over David speaking to the Real Madrid manager, and he kind of was iced out of Manchester United. Spain wasn't really a good fit for them, and Victoria found it very difficult moving the young kids, the language barrier, and with the move being very last minute too. Obviously, it's a lot to move kids to with things like schools, so she just never really settled. In February 2005, they ended up having their third son, Cruz, and 2 years later, in 2007, they decided that Spain wasn't for them, and they ended up having a move to Los Angeles when David signed a contract with the LA Galaxy. Now, one thing I didn't go over during the mid and early 2000s is when the Beckhams had one of their biggest scandals ever, and that was the Rebecca Loos cheating scandal. Just after David had moved to Spain, before Victoria had joined him, there was a lot that came out about David Beckham and his former personal assistant, Rebecca Loos. Rebecca claimed that she had a 4-month affair with David Beckham, and in my opinion, it's extremely rare that these famous people don't cheat and don't have, some of them have open relationships or have other stuff going on. And the rule usually is do what you want, but don't make me look stupid. And the whole thing with Rebecca Loos blew up into a huge thing that was extremely embarrassing for Victoria. There have been many more allegations about David Beckham and other women over the years. There was a multi-year long allegation about him and the singer Katherine Jenkins, and there have been rumors for years that the Beckhams have a somewhat open relationship. All of that's obviously alleged. I do have a friend that has a friend, so I'm hearing this through someone else. This isn't someone I've spoken to directly, but this friend claims that their friend did hook up with David Beckham, and this certainly isn't the only thing that I've heard over the years. I'm sure lots of people have heard things through the grapevines, and my friend's friend said that when they had hooked up afterwards, Beckham kind of spoke about how he was really lonely and how his family like were all really busy and his kids were starting to have their own lives and things, and he just wanted to be around them. But then again, it's like, oh, you're telling this to someone who you're sleeping with allegedly that's not your wife. There are lots of stories over the years, and I'm sure so many other people have heard them, especially when he would like go on loan to other clubs and things. There were always stories that would come out, and even things like in blinds and stuff, which obviously you can't believe all blinds, but it's certainly not a one-off story with Rebecca Lewis, and it is something that has been alleged about him over the years. But again, we don't know any of that for a fact. I will also say that although I have heard about alleged hookups and things, everything else that I've heard about David and Victoria behind the scenes, especially when it comes to with their kids, is really positive. They seem to generally be actually super involved with their kids, which isn't usually the case with a lot of celebrities, especially celebrities at their level of fame. And I've heard similar things from people that have worked with them or dealt with them on like a day-to-day basis thing. Then also people that are servers and valets, they do seem to have a good reputation with people behind the scenes, which again is not always the case with a lot of celebrities and famous people. And there are a lot of famous people who they might only be famous because of who their parents are, and they tend to be the furthest thing from kind behind the scenes. And one of those people allegedly is Nicola Peltz, who is married to David and Victoria's oldest son, Brooklyn. So we will now get into the Beckham feud as where we're up to in their history, like 2007 when they moved to the US and the Spice Girls had their first reunion tour. I think most people are familiar with this era, but the very quick kind of few lines is they moved to the US and they were welcomed with open arms. So many people were really excited about them moving. Tom Cruise and Will Smith even threw them a Welcome to America party. As I said, in 2007 and early 2008, the Spice Girls did their first reunion tour. And at this time, David was playing for the Galaxy, but he did go on loan to AC Milan. He did have some issues with the Galaxy when he first moved there because it was just like a very different situation than football in the UK, because soccer in the US just isn't as popular. It isn't given the same sort of accolades. And there was some people that were playing on the Galaxy who were earning what David Beckham would in a week in an entire year, because he was given this crazy $250 million contract. And there was some people on the Galaxy who were maybe making 30K from the Galaxy a year. And even I remember whenever he first signed to the Galaxy, I was like, oh, this is so great. They're coming to the US. And they actually had the same type of visa that I had at the time before I got a green card and an O1 visa. And David Beckham, whenever I saw I was going to the Galaxy, I went to buy a shirt and they had these like, oh, they were so ugly. They were like puke yellow, horrible color with like green stripes. And I remember they signed him and like 2 months later they like revamped the whole kit and like they put so much money into it. And the main player at the Galaxy, Donovan, he actually, I think he was the captain of the US team at one point. I have one of his US jerseys. And he and Beckham like clashed a lot because the owner or the manager of the Galaxy was kind of saying, you know, David, you're coming in here making all this crazy money and you don't seem to be, you know, all in, because he's like asking to go out on loan again to AC Milan. And the manager was explaining like, this is Donovan's Manchester United, you know, and when he saw it that way, they had had a few words in the media against each other, Beckham and Donovan, but they did eventually put their issues aside and they did go on to actually win the Cup together, and Donovan appears in the Netflix documentary too. If you want to know a lot more about like the ins and outs, especially of David's football career, I do recommend watching the Netflix documentary because there's a lot more to it, but it's very like football heavy, and I just don't think my audience is interested in that. Victoria, outside of 2007, the 2008 Spice Girls tour, she pretty much has focused on her fashion career from then. And the Spice Girls did reunite again in 2012 for the opening ceremony of the Olympics in London. But outside of that, as I said, she didn't do the 2019 tour, and she's just been very focused on her brand and everything like that. Of course, through the rest of the 2010s, their kids are growing up, and they did have one more kid, a daughter, Harper, 7, in 2011. In 2013, David actually retired from football, and at this stage, they did move back to London. And really, over the rest of the 2010s, they're just still very successful, still bringing out a lot of new things. They're focusing on their brand. They start some more companies. And around 2015, there started to be a lot of rumors about trouble in their marriage, but they did end up renewing their vows in 2017. And the year after that, there were divorce rumors. So there's always kind of this talk in the media about their relationship. But honestly, I think at this stage, so much of their relationship is tied into their business and them as celebrities that even if they didn't want to be married anymore, which I'm not saying that's the case, they probably would still stay married just because of the brand and how they're known as celebrities. So their kids have all grown up by the late 2010s for the most part, and their oldest son, Brooklyn, started trying his hand at a few different careers. All of David's sons did try in their teens, especially to play football, and they were all signed at one point to youth teams, but they never progressed further than that. Their second son, Romeo, did get a little bit further than the others, but by their mid-teens, it seemed they kind of knew like none of them were going to be professional footballers. In summer 2017, Brooklyn Beckham released a photography book that was pretty much destroyed online. A picture he took of an elephant that he put in the book especially went viral and kind of represented how frustrated people were with Nepo babies who don't really know what they're doing, don't do any work, don't try really, and just get handed a lot of opportunities that are taken away from regular people who really had done the work and gotten good. I actually am thinking about doing a video about Nepo babies, so let me know if that's something that you're interested in. Brooklyn then moved on to being a chef, and he was given opportunities, many opportunities that people would work their entire lives for and still not get. He started being given a lot of segments on TV shows, and people, again, were really frustrated by the fact that he hadn't done the work, he hadn't really tried, and he'd just been kind of given these things after maybe a few days of being like, I'm going to be a chef. Hi guys, Editing Ash here. I'm hoping this is the last Editing Ash section. There is another one that I've already filmed, but it's the 21st of September, Sunday, so I'm hoping that you see this tonight or tomorrow. But I have to add this context in because I'm never, ever going to get over this, ever. I have been talking, and I do talk throughout the video, about Brooklyn Beckham being given a lot of like these cooking segments on shows, and a lot of, well, all of the time, he isn't really even like making the stuff in the cooking segments, and they are very simple stuff. Like most of the time it's like a sandwich, like a very popular breakfast sandwich in the UK, and literally like a sandwich like in bread or in a bap, which is like a bun kind of. They do sausage, bacon, and egg baps that we call it, in as like a sandwich in the morning, and they sell them like gas stations, or you know, like it's a really popular thing to make too at home. And it's just British sausages, British bacon, which are two very, they're, it's very different from American sausages and bacon, and an egg, like usually a fried egg. Miss Gloria could whip one up, and on these segments he's having someone else make the bacon, someone else make the sausage, and then he's frying the egg and putting the sandwich together. So that's what he's doing on the segments on other people's shows. There is a show that he was given on Facebook and Instagram, so not even a YouTube show. And, I know I'm biased, but YouTube is like the top of video social media, and it is the most monetizable too. So he has a show just on Facebook and Instagram called Cooking with Brooklyn. This show per episode has a budget of $100,000, and there is 62 fucking people working on this show, making sandwiches that other people are making. That's what those 62 people are doing. They're making the sausages and the bacon and the egg, and then he's putting it together in a sandwich. $100,000. I will never get over this as someone who the first year of my channels, I literally shot and edited my videos on an iPhone because I didn't even have a laptop. But like, $100,000. Is there a bigger waste of money on this earth? No. So back to past me, who is living in a better world because she didn't know this information. So people just were getting more and more frustrated, and there were a lot of like videos and things that went viral about him. And I do think a lot of the time these nepo babies would save themselves a lot of trouble if they would just acknowledge their privilege. Like, that's all really people want. There was a super viral video of him where he's driving like I think it was like a Lamborghini or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. And it's like a YouTuber or TikToker that goes up to people driving really expensive cars and says, what do you do? And he says, oh, I'm a chef. And, I think he's kind of in a rock and a hard place because obviously, like a 20-year-old driving a Lamborghini isn't getting that from being a chef. But if he literally just would have made a joke out of it or something and said, I'm a chef, but, my dad's David Beckham or my wife's a billionaire, something like that, like, I think he would have scored a lot of points with people. But instead, he just does the complete opposite of what people want. And that is try and say, I'm the successful chef that bought this Lamborghini. Obviously, he didn't say exactly that, but that's what he's kind of implying. So when it comes to Brooklyn and his wife, Nicola Peltz, they really are fighting an uphill battle because, as I said, Nicola is the daughter of a billionaire and Brooklyn is a nepo baby who has done a lot of things that have rubbed people the wrong way. And on the other side of the feud is David and Victoria Beckham, who both come from very normal backgrounds. Obviously, Victoria more privileged than David, but they both did not have their careers handed to them. And yes, although Victoria's family were like middle class, she didn't have her career handed to her. They both worked very hard for their careers and are both generally very liked by especially the general public. I mean, a Manchester United England player and a Spice Girl, people have a lot of positive will towards them, but in general, they just are a couple that a lot of people do like. One of my sisters who moved to England a few years ago, she was a fan of the Spice Girls when she was younger, but she loves David Beckham. And he's like one of her top celebrities, or her top celebrity with Louis Theroux. She's a woman of different tastes. If I asked my sister about like the cheating stuff with David, she'd probably say, oh, like I vaguely remember something about Rebecca Lewis. And then she'd say, well, we don't know that for sure because most of what she sees is positive mainstream media stuff. She's someone who that's really how she gets like a lot of celebrity news is mainstream stuff. Like constantly I'll tell her all the stuff that I tell you guys. And she's always like, really? 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 Like she's just not someone who is into all of that stuff. And so someone like my sister, I think that's the way most general public people think of the Beckhams, like pretty positively. But when it comes to Brooklyn Beckham, I mean, the general public mostly are going to be like, oh, that's David and Victoria Beckham's kid. And then people who are into celebrity stuff, really the only things they're going to know about Brooklyn Beckham are usually not very positive things. They're going to be things like the photography book that got destroyed, the chef career, and the plethora of like other videos and media that lately has been shoving him and his wife down everyone's throats. And people are kind of like, why? Why are they getting all this publicity? Obviously, money, but people get frustrated by that because they're getting all this publicity and they're not doing anything. People in general are not fans of Nepo babies who don't put in the work to be good at acting or singing or playing a sport or whatever it is they're trying to have a career at. And they also are not fans of Nepo babies who don't acknowledge their privilege. There are plenty of Nepo babies who have successful careers and are liked by the general public. Maya Hawke and Jack Quaid spring to mind immediately. Both Maya and Jack acknowledge their privilege, but they've also put the work in as actors and they're good and they're on really great shows. I mean, those things are pretty basic. Be good at your job and acknowledge the privilege that's helped you get through the door, especially when you're being handed careers earning millions of dollars. Untalented, lazy Nepo babies who don't work hard and don't acknowledge their privilege are never going to be popular with the general public. But right now is probably the worst time in history to be one of these types of Nepo babies because so many people are going through a really, really hard time. And if you want to see how badly Nicola and Brooklyn are coming across to the general public, you only need to look at their social medias. As I said, they've always had a lot of negativity attached to them, but it seems the more that they are pushing themselves into the spotlight, the more backlash they receive. And on top of all the negativity towards them from their quote unquote careers, this attention seeking, and how poorly they come across to the public, they also now are getting backlash and tons of negative comments about their behavior towards Victoria and David. As I said, Brooklyn's wife Nicola is the daughter of a billionaire, and neither Nicola nor her dad have very positive reputations. Nicola's dad is actually the person who introduced Elon Musk to Donald Trump, and allegedly he tried to buy his way onto the Disney board because he was unhappy about all of the women and people of color that were being included in Disney and Marvel products. There have been a lot of people over the years that have spoken out about working with Nicola, especially people who worked with her on some of the few projects that she's done. They pretty much all have claimed that they had a very poor experience working with her and that she was allegedly terrible to deal with and incredibly rude. There also have long been rumors, which I don't know whether these are true because I've never been able to find black and white proof about this, but when she was a teenager, many people have alleged that she pushed one of her nannies down the stairs. So Brooklyn and Nicola don't have the best relationship with the public, and there's a lot of negative stuff that has come out from behind the scenes, especially about Nicola. So already Brooklyn and Nicola are facing a bit of an uphill battle because they're a Nepo baby and the daughter of a billionaire, and when it comes to this feud, the public has that, and then David and Victoria, who are generally liked. So it seems, or it allegedly seems, like Nicola and Brooklyn are trying to throw money at the situation to get some positive press, but also to try and dilute David and Victoria's private press. Now, apparently this feud between Brooklyn and Nicola and Brooklyn's family happened before Brooklyn and Nicola were married, and they got married in 2022. Allegedly, there were tensions between Nicola and Victoria, and over the wedding, there were a lot of blinds and articles that started to appear about a feud that was building. Anyone who's a regular viewer of the channel knows I always say one of the easiest ways to tell a lot of the time if celebrities or famous people are feuding is the whole follow, unfollow on Instagram. And I know that sounds dumb, but I would say 9 out of the 10 celebrity feuds, you can tell straight away by looking at what they're doing with their following on Instagram, because that's one of the only things that they can sometimes be in control of. A lot of the time, if, say, celebrities are working on something together, they'll be contractually obligated to post, and they'll be contractually obligated to follow all of these rules and do all of these things. But there's not going to be something in the marketing materials about you must follow this someone. And celebrities know that their fans are looking at these things. And it sounds silly, but that is how sometimes they get the message across, because they know people will be looking at this stuff, but it's not something that they're coming outright and saying, but the implication is there. And a lot of these celebrities not only know that their fans are watching and they're aware of this stuff, but the implication of unfollowing someone, especially in your family, that sends a message. And that is what has been going on between the Beckham siblings, because all of the brothers, Brooklyn, Cruz, and Romeo, all unfollowed each other. Interestingly, Brooklyn and Nicola still do follow David and Victoria, but maybe that's more to do with those being like their public accounts that they know they aren't going to be posting like a ton of personal stuff to. But Brooklyn and Nicola got a lot more blatant on social media in recent months than just unfollowing his brothers. As in May, David Beckham had a ton of parties for his 50th birthday, and Brooklyn and his wife were missing from all of them. They also didn't post any sort of birthday message. And again, that sounds silly, but all of this stuff matters to celebrities, and they also usually do, and they do for everyone else in their family and friends. And it was even more obvious because Nicola's brother's birthday is at the same time as David's, and Brooklyn Beckham posted this whole message on social media for his brother-in-law, but not for his dad. Brooklyn didn't acknowledge Victoria's birthday either, or his parents' 26th anniversary. The only time he's acknowledged anyone from the Beckham family over the last year and a half was when he posted a picture and wished his grandfather, Ted, David's dad, a happy birthday. And then on July 10th, he wished his youngest sibling, his sister Harper, a happy birthday. And coincidentally, July 10th, which is her birthday, is also when he unfollowed his brothers on Instagram. Although a lot of people do claim that Brooklyn has actually blocked his brothers, and that's why it doesn't look like they're following each other anymore. And that does seem to be true, because it seems as though they unfollowed each other at exactly the same time, which why would they unfollow him at exactly the same time? And it also, when you block someone, it untags you on stuff too. Also, just a few weeks ago, some of Nicola's friends started actually speaking out on a lot of the articles and pictures of the vow renewals. One of Nicola's closest friends said, "I love seeing people who spend years in therapy over toxic family ties coming here and judging someone who actually had the guts to walk away. Everyone's been kissing the Beckham's ass forever, and Nicola was the first to stand up for her values, since couldn't care less about their fame or money. The moment they couldn't control everything, they lost it and started planting fake press to make her look bad in the public eye. I've known her for years. She's genuine, humble, and refuses to live in a fake." There was then a just random Instagram follower who made a comment about how maybe it was Brooklyn who excluded his parents, and if he really wanted them there, they would have been there, and Brooklyn ended up liking that comment. When there were all of these Instagram posts and comments and likes made, there were a couple of stories that came out in the media about it, and this was just a few weeks ago, and all of them quoted various sources that painted Brooklyn and Nicola in an amazing light, and David and Victoria as narcissistic monsters. And in my opinion, I would be shocked to hear if those sources were anyone but Brooklyn and Nicola themselves. By the start of the summer, there were so many things that made it obvious that they were in this huge feud. But by August, just last month, they could not deny it anymore, as Brooklyn and Nicola ended up renewing their vows in August, and they only had a $3 million wedding in April 2022. And there's actually a whole lawsuit going on over Brooklyn and Nicola's wedding because the billionaires weren't happy. Hi guys, editing Ash here. So this probably doesn't need to be mentioned, but it is just so funny that I have to mention it. So Brooklyn and Nicola ended up getting married in April 2022, and they went through about 8 wedding planners, apparently. There is actually a lawsuit going on between, I believe, the 6th wedding planners and Nicola's dad, and it's for about 159,000 over a deposit that was paid to them. And the lawsuit, they actually, of course, have like released all of the exhibits and things like that. And I was reading it just kind of because I always want to do as much research as possible for these. But because it was against her dad, I thought, oh well, I'll read this while like I'm making the video, and if there's anything like interesting, I can add it in. And I read the entire thing. It is wild. The amount of emails and text messages is absolutely insane. I will leave the entire document linked in the sources. They definitely paint Nicola in Brooklyn in exactly the light that you would think. Just the most unhinged demands. And what's wild is that these wedding planners that the lawsuit's over, they were called in 6 weeks before the wedding. And there's like all this drama over the guest list. And they're like, the wedding planners are saying, oh, we got 4 lists. You know, the first list we got from the Beckhams, and it's like this perfect list, everybody's names and all of their emails and phone numbers and everything about the people, the perfect list. And then they talk about these other lists that they got. One is from Nicola and Brooklyn that people's names are misspelled. They'll just be like Brad and like no one's last name. The list has no contact information. It just sounds like an absolute mess. And then a lot of the messages too, they talk about like, do not let the Beckhams know this is a shit show. And it's, oh my God, it is really funny to read. And especially because there's like all these group chats, and you see the wedding planners asking Nicola, like, please, can we have, you know, half an hour of your time to go through this guest list because it's a mess, and you know, we don't know these people, like we need you to go through it. And she just wants it all done over text, and they're like, well, there's like hundreds and hundreds of people, we can't just text it to you. So they make this app, and then she's like, I don't want an app, I just want it text to me. And it's such a mess. And then there's some messages where they've like taken people off the guest list, but her dad's put people on. And there's messages like, make sure that Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, is not invited, and all of this other stuff. And the only kind of inputs from Brooklyn, they'll ask him like, how old is this member of your family? And Nicola will interject and be like, I don't trust Brooklyn with this, he's just guessing, you need to ask like this assistant or that assistant. And then the only thing that Brooklyn really has input in, every so often they'll be having all these messages, like, I mean, hundreds of messages a day about this guest list. And then he'll just randomly interject about the Wendy's Frosties that he wants at the wedding. And they had like apparently these little Wendy's meals for people, and the wedding planner people sent over like, you know, oh, there's going to be 6 meals, we'll name them these 6 things. I mean, the way like table names and stuff are at weddings. I remember one of my cousins, our family, everybody has a sweet tooth. So like each table was like a different type of chocolate. And these Wendy's meals, they name, like the wedding planners had named some of them like Bag It Like Beckham and stuff. And Nicola was like, no, take all the Beckham name off it. It's just so funny the way they're all talking about all this like guest stuff. And then he's just, what about the Frosties? I really need the Frosties there. It's just honestly. And he did also ask about the security having guns that shoot nets because he was worried about the drones that were probably going to be there. So he wanted to make sure that security had guns that shoot nets. If you have the time, it is worth the read just to see this sort of the way these people live that are having $3.8 million weddings that it is just so far removed from like anything that I would be dealing with, that it just was really funny and interesting to read. And yeah, they do not come across well, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on the rest of the lawsuit. And maybe you guys wouldn't be interested on like an entire video on the lawsuit, but I do plan on posting on my new second channel, Coffee, Cults, and Cats, very soon. And this sort of thing would be a good video over there because I do plan on doing like more current eventy, shorter videos, not like short, I mean short for me, like 20-30 minutes or something. So maybe going over this lawsuit when more stuff comes out would be really interesting. But honestly, it's this information is good enough to make a video on now. But anyway, back to past me. So they're in a whole lawsuit over that. But 3 years later, they renewed their vows. And there are also conspiracy theories about them doing this vow renewal so that whenever people are looking up anything about their wedding, because that's where a lot of the stories originated from when it comes to the feud, that they wanted to have, you know, everything on Google and all of the SEO be tied to this vow renewal rather than their original wedding. But as I mentioned in the beginning, no one from the Beckham family was invited, and allegedly the Beckhams only found out about this vow renewal when it was posted online. And boy, did they post a lot about this vow renewal. Nicola's billionaire father officiated the renewal ceremony, and allegedly at the ceremony, friends of Nicola spoke about how proud they were of Brooklyn for walking away from a toxic family. At the renewal ceremony, Brooklyn also gave a speech, and in it, he didn't mention his family at all, but praised Nicola's family and her father. Around this time, too, Brooklyn started posting a lot on social media with phrases like, "I'll always choose Nicola, I'll always choose you." So people obviously read into this a lot, and it seemed, again, like a not so subtle kind of message. Obviously, I don't know any of these people, but it is kind of sad, as I have, as I said, always heard that the one things you can't fault the Beckhams for are their parenting, and I've yet to hear anything positive about the Peltzes. It does seem also, ever since Brooklyn and Nicola hired the lawyers and publicists of Weinstein, Johnny Depp, Mr. Beast, Meghan and Harry, and many others, that there have been a lot of stories in the media about them, and especially a lot of fluff that I just don't know why. Well, I do know why all these outlets are doing it. Money. They were even on the cover of Glamour as a power couple, which Brooklyn's 26, Nicola's 30. He has a hot sauce range, and she's the daughter of a billionaire who was miscast in Avatar: The Last Airbender, was in Transformers 4, and her last movie that she wrote, directed, and starred in made $648 at the box office. What makes them a power couple, aside from having a lot of money that they've inherited and having a famous last name? I did used to have like a tiny bit of sympathy for Brooklyn because he did seem like a nice kid and a bit of a golden retriever man. And I do think that, again, like the smallest drop of sympathy, that having two incredibly successful parents, and anything you do is going to be scrutinized by millions and millions of people, but that sympathy is very small considering the privilege and wealth and fame and everything that is just handed to Brooklyn and all of these Nepo babies. He has all the money and privilege in the world. And the same with Nicola. They could literally go and study and become the best chef and become the best actress. They could go and work their way up because obviously they have the privilege of like all of these connections, but also they can go and work for nothing or very little pay because they have so much money from their parents. But instead, they've just tried to bulldoze their way into success with their parents' money, privilege, and name. They're so ignorant that they don't even know how ignorant they are. They don't even know what they don't know. And that's evident by all of the things they put out. I mean, that movie that Nicola just put out, I'll leave a link to like a synopsis below. It is wild. But even things like the photography book, like you just have no understanding of what it actually takes for regular people to get something like that, because again, all of this is just handed to them. Even their social media followings, like they have careers that people would work for all of their lives and never get to like a fraction of their followings. I watched this video on Brooklyn's Instagram of him unboxing this collaboration his hot sauce company did with a fancy, I think it was a bourbon company. Some people would work all their lives to get something like that. And the product did look beautiful. It was a really fancy box, and from what I saw, looked gorgeous and all the products looked nice. But it was the worst promotion and unboxing I've ever seen in my fucking life. He starts recording and he's like holding up the box, and he hasn't even like reversed the image. So like you can't even really read it because it's backwards and it's so fast. And he doesn't even have like a table. He's like half holding it and like taking things out like, oh yeah, like just the most terrible job. Like you can't see anything. Like he said, oh, there's these cool glasses in here, but never takes them out of the box. It's just like not even half-assed, like it's just a mess.
I think these are glasses for when you make the drink, which is really cool. I think you get 2 of those, 2 glasses.
But he has 16 million followers, and even as terrible as that video was, it still had 13,000 likes, which, don't get me wrong, 16 million followers and only 13,000 likes, that's fucking horrendous. But it just sums everything up, because an influencer with a 100th of the following that Brooklyn Beckham has, they would know how to do an unboxing and they would know how to post well on social media, because they would never even get to 100th of his following if they didn't, because no one else could post stuff like that and get 16 million followers. Again, all of this stuff is just literally handed to them, because it also doesn't matter. It doesn't actually matter if his social media is successful. It doesn't matter if his hot sauce is successful. He could actually even just do a Kylie Jenner and put out a tiny, tiny amount of these boxes or of his hot sauce, because it doesn't actually need to make money. It just needs to give the illusion of success. As I've been making this video, actually just yesterday, the trailer for Victoria's Netflix documentary came out. David had his documentary 2 years ago, so now it's Victoria's turn, because I believe both David's documentary Beckham and Victoria's, titled Victoria, they are both self-commissioned. There were a lot of articles yesterday about the trailer that seems to indicate there's a few little lines here and there acknowledging the fallout with Brooklyn and Nicola, but I'm pretty sure it will only be addressed with a very subtle little line or two, the same way David Beckham's Rebecca Lou's affair was addressed in his documentary. That's really to say it wasn't. Victoria just said, this period of time in Spain was the worst time of my life. It will be interesting to see what happens when this documentary comes out and in the future. I'm sure Brooklyn and Nicola will keep pushing themselves into the spotlight more and more, but I don't think much of the public is waiting with bated breath to see what they'll do next. And really, by feuding with Brooklyn's parents, they've lost some of the only goodwill the public has towards them, since David and Victoria, as I said, are generally liked by the general public. I guess it's just a question of how long will the media allow them to pay their way into all of these things and to push their photo shoots and magazine covers and articles and interviews and all stuff like that. And how many times will they basically buy their way into putting out movies or hot sauce ranges or whatever else range is going to come out next? As I said, Nicola did put out that film that she did as Shane Dawson, and for her first project ever, she wrote, directed, and starred in it. And just like Shane Dawson, it did not get a lot of positive anything, box office or reviews. So these people do have endless money. So I guess we'll have to continue to hear from them as long as the media will continue to allow them to buy their way in, especially given that they not only have famous lawyers, but also ruthless marketing and PR teams at their beck and call. Since 2022, rumors have swirled that David and Victoria Beckham have been locked in a bitter feud with their eldest son Brooklyn and his billionaire heiress wife Nicola Peltz. But just a few weeks into 2026, Brooklyn Beckham himself not only confirmed the feud, but detailed over a 6-page Instagram story why he had no intentions of reconciling with his parents or siblings, and why he felt David and Victoria ruined not only his wedding, but his life. Brooklyn also levied shocking accusations against his parents, and his statement went absolutely viral, sparking a lot of sympathy for him and causing many people to question everything they thought they knew about the Beckhams. But on the other side, when comparing Brooklyn's statements with existing stories and information, including what Brooklyn and Nicola have previously said themselves, it seems like Brooklyn's viral story might not be entirely true, especially when comparing what he says happened at his wedding and what's detailed in the lawsuit filed over his wedding. The lawsuit also shines a light on the dynamic and tensions between David and Victoria Beckham and Nicole Peltz's billionaire parents. So today, we're going to be examining Brooklyn Beckham's statement, as well as diving into the details of the lawsuit and the other extensive documentation, like wedding pictures, including those of Nicola and Brooklyn's first dance. And on top of all of that, we'll also be exploring the many behind-the-scenes stories of both the Peltzes and the Beckhams, and how none of these people are who they appear to be. As most people are probably aware, the biggest pop culture news story of this year so far happened last week on Monday, January 19th, when Brooklyn Beckham posted an Instagram story that shattered the perfect family image the Beckhams have put forward for nearly 3 decades. If you're a regular viewer on this channel, none of this will have been surprising, however, as over 6 months ago, we went over the Beckham family feud in a lot of detail and even went over some of the stories that Brooklyn Beckham highlighted in his statement about his wedding and his grievances with his parents. And it will become very relevant how we were able to talk about those very specific aspects all those months ago. I'm sure most people clicking on this video know who the Beckhams are, but if you want more on David and Victoria's backstory and their origin, I will leave that video linked down below in the description box, the sources and the cards, but you don't need to watch that video to understand this one. That video just goes into more of David and Victoria and all of the history and behind the scenes stories with them and a lot of the cheating allegations and things like that. For a very long time, a lot of British people have called the Beckhams the modern day royal family. And what's very interesting is for many years they've been called that. And now a lot of people and media outlets are making another comparison between the Beckhams and the actual royal family, because the path that the Beckham son has started down seems to be very in line with the path chosen by a son in the actual royal family. And that son in the royal family also married an American actress. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, a lot of people are comparing what went on with them and their kind of separation from the royal family to Brooklyn and Nicola's separation from the Beckham family. And what's really interesting is Harry and Meghan originally were friends with David and Victoria, but now they are friends with Brooklyn and Nicola. And apparently Brooklyn and Nicola's friendship with Harry and Meghan kind of came out of David and Victoria picking William and Kate when Harry and William had their falling out. It was like William and Kate got David and Victoria in this blow up between the two princes. And Brooklyn and Nicola have also allegedly been getting a lot of advice from Harry and Meghan over this whole public family fallout situation. And there's also been a development today that's happened about Brooklyn and Nicola that seems to be very in line with taking advice from Harry and Meghan, but just put a pin in Harry and Meghan for just a second. As I said, I'm sure most people watching this video don't need any introduction as to who the Beckhams are. Victoria Beckham was part of one of the most famous girl groups of all time, if not the most famous, the Spice Girls, and the Spice Girls sold over 100 million records. They broke all kinds of records with their music, but also outside of their music. They were the most merchandised group in music history. There was Spice Girls Pepsi, Polaroid cameras, Chubba Chub lollies, and many other things. They even had crazy records like they're the best-selling celebrity doll of all time. And I do actually have Spice Girls dolls, which I will show you. They're the only dolls I ever had as a kid. But the Spice Girls, absolutely enormous, absolutely huge, but Victoria is just one half of the Beckhams. The same year that the Spice Girls went on their first world tour in '97, Victoria Beckham, who was Victoria Adams at the time, met her future husband, David Beckham. Back in the 90s, David Beckham was a professional footballer, starting out playing for Man United in 1992 at the age of just 17, and he played for several other clubs, retiring in 2013 after 21 years in football. He also played and captained the England squad for many years as well. David Beckham was a once-in-a-lifetime player. He was exceptional, and individually, David and Victoria were exceptional, but they weren't satisfied with just being one of the most successful musicians of all time, married to one of the most successful footballers of all time. They together as a couple and later as a family became a brand, and they really were the blueprint of what it was to become a brand as a person. Because before the Beckhams, certainly in the UK, that wasn't really a thing. People didn't even use that terminology in the late 90s and early 2000s. A brand was, oh, like Nike, like I'm wearing a brand, or Adidas trainers. It wasn't just spoken about in the same way it is today. Before David Beckham, very successful footballers would maybe do the odd promotion for athletic brands like Nike or Adidas, but the Beckhams used their successful careers as a famous footballer and a famous Spice Girl as a jumping off point into something much, much bigger. And this stuff is so important to keep at the forefront of your mind throughout this video, because the Beckhams' decision to become a brand, a family brand at that, is really at the heart of not only their success, but seemingly also the central factor in what has caused the estrangement from their eldest son, Brooklyn Peltz Beckham. Victoria and David have 4 children, Brooklyn, Romeo, Cruz, and Harper, and since before they were born, their children have been part of Brand Beckham and a commodity. Brooklyn Beckham was born in 1999, and I have such clear memories of the news coming out of Victoria being pregnant, Brooklyn Beckham was born, and all the press around it. And again, this is when there was no social media, and I also was about 12. David and Victoria had only started dating 2 years prior in 97. They got engaged in 98. They had Brooklyn in the March of 99, and then they got married in July 99. This is all happening at the absolute blow up of David and Victoria's individual careers. The Spice Girls were huge, and David Beckham was achieving massive success at Man United. In 1999, they won the treble, which is absolutely one of the biggest things that can happen to a football player, and it's practically impossible. Despite David and Victoria having this massive individual success, success, they wanted more and realized together they were worth more than the sum of their parts. They both experienced huge success, but they quickly saw that the interest and reaction to them together was something else entirely. Outside of their individual careers as a footballer and a Spice Girl, the early days of Brand Beckham, the main focus was building, promoting, and feeding into them as a couple. And of course, as I said, this is before social media. So the way that they did this in the early days was publicity with things like magazines, newspapers, the TV, interviews, attending events, and anything and everything in between. They also knew that everything they did together was marketable, especially life events, and there was no bigger life event than their wedding and the birth of their first child. These two enormous events, as I said, happened within 6 months of each other in 1999, so this brought unbelievable amounts of attention as well as huge paydays. Even before Brooklyn Beckham was born, he helped his parents bag multiple cover stories and 7-figure paydays. In the UK, there's a magazine called OK. It's different from the US one. And the Beckhams worked with OK constantly for all of their life events and exclusively, which OK paid handsomely for. The man in charge of OK magazine, Richard Desmond, spoke about the fact that for years, every Friday night practically, he would go to Victoria's parents' house and he, David, and Victoria would sit and drink wine and plan the next features that they do and what they were going to focus on next. When David and Victoria got married, that same day, the night of their wedding, they stayed up until 3 a.m. with Richard Desmond selecting the pictures that were going to be used in OK's exclusive cover story about the Beckham wedding. And the Beckhams were paid £1 million for this exclusive, which back in the late 90s was close to $2 million. Brooklyn's birth received the same treatment as their wedding. They shared everything about the birth, the pregnancy, and even gave exclusive tours and pictures of their house and Brooklyn's nursery. Of course, being the son of a Spice Girl and a footballer, Brooklyn Beckham would have been a Nepo baby. There would have been eyes on him and attention on him, but the Beckhams creating this Beckham brand that put so much focus on the family, put the family at the center, and cultivated so much attention. Essentially, Brooklyn Beckham was famous before he was even born, and he doesn't really know anything else. The same way he's been unbelievably privileged and wealthy and knows nothing other than that. But David and Victoria have both had documentaries go out on Netflix recently. David's came out in October 2023, and Victoria's came out just last October in 2025. I'm going to put documentaries in quotes because they aren't really documentaries. They're publicity pieces. And if you want to be really cynical, you could just say they're kind of ads for Brand Beckham. They are very well done. They're beautifully put together, but they aren't documentaries as they're hideously biased given that they're self-commissioned. So that's also important to keep in mind with them. In David's documentary, David and Victoria talk at different points about the paparazzi and the paparazzi like following them when they're taking the kids to school and stuff. And there's a lot of clips that they show, but there's one in particular where Brooklyn is in the car with them and he's really young, like he has to be 2 or 3. And in this clip, they're driving through like a sea of people, all fans and paparazzi. And there's a lot of people like banging on the car and they're driving so slow. So a lot of people are coming up and I'll obviously show it on the screen. And Brooklyn is obviously like getting really upset and like starting to cry. And they're telling him, oh, don't worry, like they can't get in the car. But when you look at that situation, I mean, that has to have some major impacts on someone. And clips like that represent the bad side of having very famous parents. And then on the other side, you have the unbelievable positives, the side that gives you things in life that most people would absolutely kill for even 1% of. Now, just to say, we're going to look at both sides of things, and to be honest, spoiler alert, I think the real story, happens to be somewhere in the middle, because both couples have put out information that's contradictory. Both couples have fed the press a lot of stories and information over the years. We're also going to get into some lore with the Beckhams and the Peltz Beckhams. Like, I don't think many people will know that the woman who made a career out of allegedly sleeping with David Beckham is the cousin of Piers Morgan. Now, I've followed the Beckhams nearly my entire life. I have been a big Spice Girls fan since I was a kid. They were my first ever concert, and I've been to all of their tours. My dad was a huge Man United fan, and I've always kind of had a soft spot for Brooklyn Beckham, as much as you can have a soft spot for a Nepo baby, but he is the king of Nepo babies. But he's also someone who, any story I've ever heard about him from people that have interacted with him, he seems to be a very nice guy. Of course, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, but he also seems to genuinely really love his wife. And anyone I know who spent time with him has said he's just very polite, very kind, easygoing, and he's also very nice to staff and goes out of his way to kind of spend time with people, talk to them, take pictures, all of that, which, especially for a Nepo baby, is not common to hear. I've heard from several different people about Brooklyn Beckham also kind of trying to clean up for Nicola when she is rude to people or gets into situations where she doesn't come off very well. Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz were at a party that a friend of mine was at, and my friend was standing in a group with like about 6 people talking, and Nicola came over and was a bit intoxicated, and she walked past the group but kind of like stumbled and hit into 2 of the women, and she didn't say anything, and one of the women, when Nicola was walking away, kind of said, "Excuse you," and Nicola started getting like a little bit fresh with them, and Brooklyn intervened and like calmed Nicola down and apologized profusely to the women and was just very kind and nice to them. I've also heard and read many places that Nicola is rude to staff. She kind of goes through a lot of staff and does the constant threatening to get people fired. That, you know, that's kind of the impression that you think of when you think of a spoiled child of a billionaire, and this kind of I want it now, immediate action. And if you can't do exactly what I want, when I want, the second I want it, then fire them or make their life very difficult. And we do see a lot of evidence of that in the wedding planner's lawsuit. I hope you can see G okay. But another story that I've heard, and this isn't something that I've been told directly, this was a friend of a friend, so take that as you will, with a grain of salt. But my friend's friend was at quite a nice bar in LA, and this was a good few years ago before Brooklyn and Nicola were married. I think this is when they were engaged, and they were at the bar, and Nicola got into an argument with someone she was in the bathroom with. My friend's friend didn't know if it was like someone she knew beforehand or someone she just bumped into, and because she kind of just saw this happening and recognized them. And Nicola was, again, it seemed like she was intoxicated, and when she was storming out, she picked her handbag up, which I assume was a very expensive handbag, and like swung it around. And when she kind of swung it around, she knocked like a bunch of glasses over, and obviously they fell and smashed on the ground, and she stormed out. But Brooklyn again went over, like tried to clean it up, and the wait staff were obviously like, "Oh no, like don't worry, we'll do it." And he just apologized to the staff, to everyone around. He went around to all of the wait staff and like apologized to them, and he offered to obviously like pay even more for like the issues and stuff. And so a lot of stories like that he seems to come off very well, and Nicola not so much. As well as staff, it seems as though Nicola's gone through her fair share of friendships, and a lot of people have said that she doesn't really have the ability to sustain a lot of friendships and relationships with people in the same vein that she goes through a lot of staff. And she has had quite a lot of like public intense friendships for a year or so, and then they're never heard from again. One of the most well-known was Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez, Brooklyn, and Nicola were very, very close for about a year and used to call themselves like a throuple. They'd post each other constantly on social media. They'd go on vacation together. They had matching tattoos together, and they just spent a lot of time together, even like major holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and they stopped showing up on each other's social media. People kind of picked it up, and then one day all of the pictures together of Nicola and Selena were erased from Nicola's Instagram, and Nicola posted just an Instagram story with like a black background that said, "Some friendships have expiration dates." And I talk about this all the time in my videos, that you see this kind of behavior on social media, and David and Victoria are notorious for it too, where Nicola, Brooklyn, and tons of other celebrities wield social media like a weapon and use it to post straightforward things, yes, like promoting their careers and photo shoots and videos and things, but they also use it to communicate plenty of other things, like the Selena Gomez thing. I mean, if you knew very little about Nicola Peltz, Selena Gomez, Brooklyn Beckham, and you clicked on their story or it was shown to you in your feed, you might just see, oh, friendships have expiration dates, and not thinking anything of it. But if you're following everything and you know, oh, they had this close friendship, all of a sudden you don't see Selena Gomez, this story is posted on the same day, all of the pictures disappear, you can infer, oh, this is about Selena Gomez. And the Peltz Beckhams have done this for the past few years. It's like the whole thing about them not following or blocking the Beckhams and things like that. And so there are these subtle ways that information is put out. And that honestly is a lot of the way tip-offs happen in the media now, even with actual outlets like the Daily Mail and companies like that are notorious for trolling through social media. And originally, this kind of story about the Beckham feud came from stuff like this, with them not liking each other's posts. And then one day, someone noticing all the tags were gone. And so either Brooklyn had blocked his family or his family had blocked Brooklyn. That's kind of hard to say, but we will talk about that a little bit more when we go through Brooklyn's statement. Pretty much since the beginning of their relationship, Brooklyn and Nicola have done this very performative social media posting, and it is very reminiscent of David and Victoria. You do kind of have two different types of social media, and obviously both are curated and performative, but I feel like David and Victoria still are that essential like 90s, 2000s, very distant celebrities. Like you don't really actually get a quote unquote real look at their life. It is all very social media posts that, oh, it's this event, it's this like professional picture, everything looking perfect, or it's sponsored content, which is a lot of it, or it's these very kind of performative, manipulative posts that seem like they're them being real, like posting posts about, oh, my kids, Brooklyn, Romeo, Cruz, and Harper, I love you so much, which that's about them posting and them trying to show people, look how much we love our kids, look how great parents we are, when really, if you just wanted to tell your kid you love them, you just turn around and say it to them. It's about them posting. It's not about the actual kids. Whereas a lot of celebrities today on their social media, while it is curated, you're seeing actually like a bit of a peek into their life. Obviously, they're only showing what they want to, but some celebrities, they might show you, oh, this is me waking up hungover in the morning, or them sitting just having a chat, or they're watching a TV show and they recommend it. But Beckham, the brand Beckham, they don't conduct themselves that way. And Nicola and Brooklyn, they very much follow what David and Victoria do. They have this kind of distance, and most of their social media posts are, I mean, it's mainly sponsored content, or it is these posts like, I love you so much, and, you know, their wedding pictures that were in Vogue. And I have talked about this on the channel before, but a lot of people in Hollywood who they make their relationship into a marketing tool, they do have that distance there. Like people like Ashton and Mila, Blake and Ryan, Dax and Kristen, which I'm going to do a video soon on them. They're the same sort of line as David and Victoria. And I really do think that Brooklyn and Nicola are following suit with that. Brooklyn and Nicola would have got married a lot quicker than they did. They got engaged 8 months after they started dating, and originally they were going to get married around their year anniversary, but they couldn't have that big wedding at that time because of COVID. The wedding took place in April 2022, and it's the wedding of a billionaire daughter. It was wild, and it cost allegedly close to $4 million. They did sell the exclusive pictures to Vogue, and they had over 500 guests, and it took place at Nicola Peltz's father's estate in Palm Beach. They live in Billionaires Row in Palm Beach. Palm Beach is very popular for billionaires. I've heard that just shy of 60 billionaires live there out of the like 2,000 billionaires that there are. Of course, Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate is there as well. And Nicola's dad, Nelson Peltz, is actually infamous for a lot of things, but one of the biggest being that he introduced Elon Musk to Donald Trump. A lot of the other things that he's known for is being involved in Snapple, Wendy's, Hellman's, and Brooklyn and Nicola had a Wendy's food truck at their wedding, which we'll talk about in a sec because of some really funny text messages in the lawsuit about Wendy's stuff. And he also Nelson Peltz attempted a hostile takeover of Disney because apparently, in his opinion, Disney was going too woke, but it ended up failing. He also has been involved in companies like Paramount, which his involvement made Nicola's acting career take off. She ended up getting roles in things like Avatar: The Last Airbender and the Transformers movie because of Nelson Peltz's investment in Paramount. More recently, Nicola wrote, produced, directed, and starred in a movie called Lola that was critically panned and referred to as poverty porn. It ended up only making $648 at the box office opening week. Brooklyn actually was supposed to appear in this movie saying a line and walking up and saying the line, and after a significant amount of hours, reportedly over 6, they had to move on because they couldn't get him to do the shot. I don't think it's hard to imagine where Nicola's funding for this film came from, and it has been spoken about in quite a number of outlets and just people who are familiar with the family that Nicola has had a lot of passive income streams set up by her father, and the reported allowance that she gets is $1 million a month. Allegedly, Nelson Peltz actually even questioned why the Beckhams were not funding Brooklyn in the same way. Of course, the Beckhams have funded a lot of Brooklyn's earlier career and things. I mean, he's been shown like driving around in million plus cars, and they've helped him a lot with setting up and things. But their hope was that he was able to stand on his own 2 feet. And allegedly, Nelson Peltz kind of looked down on this, and he thought the Beckhams were not setting Brooklyn and Nicola up in the right way financially. And allegedly one of his biggest issues with the Beckhams was that they wouldn't buy Brooklyn and Nicola an 8-figure mansion to get their married life set up in the right way. There has been a lot of speculation that Nelson Peltz isn't the biggest fan of Brooklyn, and Brooklyn's been trying to kind of win his approval, and it has more to do with Brooklyn's like career and achievements that way rather than his personality and how he treats his daughter, because by all accounts he does seem to treat her very well. By every account, even that of Brooklyn and Nicola, the wedding was an absolute disaster. And I'm going to touch on aspects of the lawsuit and the wedding as we kind of continue, because the lawsuit revealed a lot. But essentially, the original wedding planner was a man named Preston Bailey, who is very famous in the wedding industry. And he stepped back saying he had too much on his plate, but that just seems very very suspicious, and I think there's a lot more to the story there. It just is very weird. And the Peltzes then go through a series of other wedding planners. No one seems to know exactly how many. It is at least 3 based on like the documents for the lawsuit and like all of the text messages. But there's been people that have claimed that it was upwards of 6. The second set of wedding planners only worked for 9 days on the wedding, but they are the ones that Nelson Peltz files a lawsuit against for the $159,000 deposit, and the planners also file a countersuit against Peltz, Nicola, and Nicola's mother. As I said from the beginning of their relationship, Nicola and Brooklyn do really push themselves out and market themselves as this new kind of it couple, and this really increases when they hire the lawyers and publicists that in the past have represented Harvey Weinstein, Johnny Depp, Mr. Beast, Harry and Meghan, and a ton of other celebrities and well-known people. And when these people come on board, they're really pushed out as this kind of Gen Z power couple. They even get like cover shoots with Glamour calling them a power couple. And it's kind of like, why? Just because they have a lot of money? Like, what have they done? But that just really is what's being pushed forward. And you start to see even more of these fluff articles being introduced as well. Despite all of the money they're spending and the teams who are creating and curating all of this content and pumping it out on social media and all of the Vogues and Glamour and podcasts and interviews, their social media interaction and engagement is really terrible for people that have millions of followers too. And I think that's mainly because you have a lot of people following them to see what's going on, but they're not necessarily engaged and fans of them. It could also be because they've purchased a lot of followers. Obviously, I don't think all of their followers are purchased, but if I just looked at their accounts and I didn't know whose they were, I would definitely think a significant number of followers had been purchased by both Nicola and Brooklyn. And this is fairly common for celebrities who aren't A-listers. Again, not that they buy all of them, but they buy a significant amount to juice their numbers. But their lack of engagement could also be because their social media content is so poor and so much of it is just sponsored content. I've talked about this in loads of videos, but I don't understand why a lot of people follow certain celebrities because all they do is produce ads. Like all you're doing is watching ads. And David and Victoria are as guilty of this as anyone, that it's not actually people wanting to make content and make videos. It's just, oh, I need to make a video because I have this brand deal. And that really, their content, Brooklyn and Nicola, it is, even their brand deals for their own products are terrible. And they just come across so lazy. And even the smallest bit of effort with, they have the best equipment and cameras and the teams of people doing the editing and everything, like the smallest amount of effort, they could make these really awesome videos, but it's just the laziest ad possible to kind of tick the box of, I held up this whatever it is I'm promoting and moved on. Another point where a lot of these fluff stories and interviews and things started being pushed was when all of the stuff from the lawsuit was coming out, especially all of the text messages. And this group chat was between Nicola, Brooklyn, Nicola's mom, Nicola's publicist, and her stylist, and then the wedding planners. The text messages are pretty wild, and especially when you look at how many messages there were, and the wedding planners only worked for them for 9 days, there was a 12-hour period where there was almost 400 messages sent. That was a message every 3 minutes. And the sort of asks that they have for the wedding planners are outrageous too, considering these planners came in to an absolute mess of a wedding that wasn't organized. The guest list wasn't even organized, and the wedding was 6 weeks away, and it is a wedding for 500 people that's costing $4 million. One of the biggest focuses in the lawsuit and in this group chat is about the guest list. And the wedding planners talked about getting 3 lists. One list was from the Beckhams, one list was from the Peltz family, and one was from Nicola and Brooklyn. And they said the list from the Beckhams was like super organized, had everybody, their full name, their spouse's name, the kids, anybody else who's invited, all the contact information, and it was just like a perfect list. They said the Peltz family list was a mess and just had, people's first names and no contact information, and people would be missing and then repeated. And then they said the Brooklyn and Nicola's list was an absolute disaster. They would just have Brad, nothing else, just the name Brad. And they would say, well, who is this? Like, is it Brad Pitt? Is it, who is this person? And they would just be like, oh, ask an assistant. And whenever they'd be asked for like contact information, they'd just tell them, oh, Google it. And, a lot of these people are celebrities and famous people. And even if it wasn't, like, it's hard to just Google someone and be like, oh, is this the right person? Like, let me just send this invite to all of the John Smiths in Florida. And so the planners found it very, very difficult. And there's even messages where they're trying to like nail down, oh, is this person like a kid? Because Nicola and Brooklyn would call people kids in their list, but they'd actually be like 25. And so obviously for, meals and stuff, it's like a different situation and seating and things. And the wedding planners were asking Brooklyn about one of his cousins, and Nicola just like jumps in and she's like, don't ask Brooklyn. I don't trust him with this. You need to go to the assistants. And it's like, the most ridiculous things. But the wedding guests were the thing that they just could never get a handle on because it was such a mess. And even though that's what the planners were trying to focus on and said, let's just sort the guest list out, and then we can go over these other things that Nicola was focusing on, like her and Brooklyn having monogrammed pajamas. And the fact that it's 6 weeks to the wedding, I mean, maybe we ask an assistant about the monogrammed pajamas if they're really that important. Or maybe like we're going to have to let the monogrammed pajamas go because it's 6 weeks out and there's 500 people coming and the guest list is a mess. And there's also the factor of like COVID and testing and vaccines and all of that stuff was going on as well. And that was actually what they were going to use to kind of make it seem like the guest list was in order. They were going to contact people and say, oh, we need to know like your vaccine status and like your testing status so that they could see if people had got the invite, if they'd RSVP'd, because they didn't even know who had actually got an invite and who hadn't, and if the RSVPs were right. There was also like constant changes to the guest list too. So there's one like text message that went really viral that was Nicola texting her dad saying in like all capitals, DeSantis cannot be invited. Please confirm DeSantis has been removed from the guest list and stuff like that. So the wedding planners are not only working with these lists that are all over the place, but there's also like these random changes coming through in a group chat that there's hundreds of messages being sent a day. And there'd also be messages that, Nicola would send like a picture of an all pink room with like soft play stuff and like a big theme for what looked like a bachelorette party or something like that. And Nicola would just send a picture and be like, who's going to make this happen for me? And again, like the wedding is like 6 to 5 weeks out. And these are huge asks for people that are having a lot of other things on their plate at the time. And of course, like they're professionals, they are getting paid a lot of money for this. But the stuff that she was sending, it wasn't just like, oh, you can just order this from Amazon and, we'll set it up. A lot of it would be stuff that you'd have to order weeks, months in advance and big pieces and things like that. And it just seemed like sometimes she'd be scrolling on her phone at night and be like, oh, I want to do that. And when it wasn't going to happen within a few weeks, that's when she went to the dad and was like, we need to get rid of these people because they're not making it happen. And you might be wondering what Brooklyn was doing at this time. And to be honest, his messages, like he does come across like very nice in the messages and just wanting to like help. But again, with like the age thing, he wants to help, but he can't really help. And there's a lot of focus with Brooklyn on the Wendy's food truck that they were going to have. He was very concerned about making sure they had Frosties, which, I mean, Frosties are really good, so I can't blame him about that. Brooklyn's other contributions to this group chat were mainly around the Wendy's food truck still. And they were going to do these little burger meals. Like there was 4 different meals. They'd have a burger, fries. Brooklyn did suggest having an option of truffle fries and a Frosty. And the wedding planners had suggested like little cutesy names for each one. That was like, one was Bag It Like Beckham. Nicola absolutely hated these names and didn't want them and didn't want the Beckham worked into the names. And the suggestions from Brooklyn were that they have a boy burger and a girl burger, and the girl burger wouldn't have a bun. And is that man Posh Spice's son or what? The other suggestion from Brooklyn was around the security. And so Brooklyn in these messages is talking about, they talk about the NDA, they talk about how there's going to be like a lot of paparazzi, and he says there's probably going to be drones trying to get pictures. And so he suggests they get a gun with a net that they can shoot at the drones to capture them. And they're also in the later messages where they're talking about the security, it also goes over why there is no footage of Brooklyn and Victoria dancing, or to use the correct terminology from Brooklyn, there's no footage of Victoria dancing on Brooklyn. And so they actually had these pouches at the wedding that people had to put their phones in. And you might have seen them. They are starting to become more common. I started to see them like not only at like Hollywood events and Hollywood parties, but I've also started to see them at like concerts. I've seen some schools have them now. And you basically are given a pouch and then you have to put your phone in it. So you still keep your phone, which I think is a really good idea because so many people, especially Hollywood celebrities, they're not going to want to hand over their phone. So you still get to keep it, but it's in like a blacked out pouch. And once it's sealed in there, you have to, I mean, there's all different kinds, but the one I mainly see is that you have to bring the pouch up to this little device that'll be like on the wall or something. And it looks like a little thermostat, a lot of the ones I see. And you tap the pouch against it, and there's some sort of like magnet or something in it, and it like unlocks, and then you can take your phone out. So there's apparently no one that was allowed their phone, with one exception, and that one exception was Victoria Beckham. And considering she was busy dancing on Brooklyn, I guess that's why she didn't have any footage of the dance. So from the wedding in April 2022 onwards, there begins to just be more and more stories about a possible feud between the Peltz Beckhams and the Beckhams. And this does just increase over time. There's more stories about it. And while all this discussion about a feud is going on, there are a lot of stories printed that have things like sources close to the Peltz Beckhams say, and it will be stuff that we now know is true, like about the whole dress situation, about the first dance, about Mark Anthony. And we will go into all of those things when we talk about the statement. But the statement does absolutely prove that Brooklyn and Nicola were leaking and briefing the tabloids on stuff. There's no other way that this information would have got out. No one is breaking the NDA. And Victoria and David, who of course leak stuff all the time and brief the press about things probably every day of the week, they're not going to leak these stories because they make them look terrible. There's no one else it could have been from. And as I went over in my last video about the Beckhams, there are constant friends of Nicola and just other people, you know, that work for them and stuff that are on Instagram in comments saying things like, I'm so proud of Brooklyn for walking away from his toxic family, and talking about the dress and all these other things. There's just this constant barrage of people that are saying what was in the statement and putting it in tabloids, putting it on social media. And so again, there's no one else that could have been leaking this stuff than them. So fast forward to May 2025, and everybody is pretty sure that there's a feud. And outside of literally a statement like Brooklyn's, in May and August 2025, there's two events that all but confirm there's serious, serious issues and a separation between Brooklyn and his family, because in May 2025, David Beckham turns 50 and he has a whole birthday extravaganza. It's over multiple weekends. He throws a big, huge party at their house in the Cotswolds. And it's, of course, plastered all over social media, picture perfect family and all of that. And Brooklyn and Nicola do not go. And as I mentioned also in my last Beckham video, it was reported then, like I'd heard from multiple people, that Brooklyn and Nicola were in London when that party happened. So it was super bizarre, and people were, again, like very confident by this stage that something was seriously wrong between Brooklyn and his family. And then in August 2025, it really, really blew up because Brooklyn and Nicola post on Instagram that they have renewed their vows after 3 years of marriage, and not one member of the Beckham family was at the vow renewal. And apparently the Beckhams didn't even know it was happening until just a little bit before they posted it on social media. And again, like very performative social media stuff. Oh, I love you, can never live without you, and I'll always choose you. Like all of the language was very intentional. And also Nicola's father officiated the wedding, or the vow renewal. I don't know why I keep saying vow renewal. And so they kind of had like an extra dagger to the heart with that. And from that point on, I mean, there's no denying it. That is just, if David's thing wasn't proof of it, I mean, that pretty much was. And to just add more gasoline to the fire, Victoria Beckham in October 2025 has her big documentary premiere, and Brooklyn and Nicola are nowhere to be seen. And everybody else, of course, is there, just like they always do, the Beckhams at these like family events. Everybody's lined up, and Cruz and Romeo's girlfriends were there too. Like, and the way that the Beckhams even like line themselves up is, you can predict it. Like it's always the same. Like the girlfriends are always on the ends, and Nicola wives are always on the end too. And usually it would, like if all the kids are there, it would always be Victoria, and Brooklyn would always be with her. And then Harper, the daughter, would be with David, and then Romeo and Cruz would be on like either side. And I'm sure I can show you tons of pictures where it's exactly that. But at Victoria's premiere, because there was no Brooklyn, Harper was with Victoria, like leaning into her. Just before we go into the statement, I do want to mention Brooklyn's career and work just very briefly, as I know most people watching will be aware that he's had several career attempts. He was a footballer when he was younger, he was a model, a photographer, and more recently he's gone into being a chef. All of these things have failed pretty miserably and very publicly, and he's been pretty torn apart for his poor attempts at these careers, the most infamous being his photography and his photography book that he released. Everyone knows about the blurry pictures in it, and the worst picture of an elephant ever taken, and also the most famous picture of an elephant ever taken, where he takes a picture of an elephant saying, "Elephants, amazing to see, but hard to photograph." And it's just like the shadow of an elephant that you can't see. I do think there's valid criticism for David and Victoria when it comes to these very early careers of Brooklyn's, because the photography career, modeling, even like football, they were all when Brooklyn was a teenager. He was a teenager when he released that photography book. And I think it's a different story now with the chef and everything like that, because he is a grown man and he should know better now. But with the photography stuff, I mean, you're a teenager, your parents are incredibly successful and famous, and they're telling you, yeah, do this photography book. Yeah, you're good enough to go and shoot a campaign for Burberry. I think that people's frustration with him now is the fact that whenever you see anything he does, especially if you listen to him in interviews, which I listened to so many for this video, and they were a hard watch and got worse as they went on. I think that most people, they just hear that he's obviously not really putting any effort in, putting any work in. There's no drive, there's no passion. He's just basically saying, oh, I fancy doing that. And then immediately there's a team of like 60 people and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, being thrown at the situation. And all of a sudden, he's a photographer, he's a chef, he's this, he's that, because he kind of bought it. And that is confirmed by himself in many interviews. I will, of course, put some clips in, but if you want to see the full interviews or the full context of anything, I, as always, have the Google link in the pinned comment and the description box that links to all of the sources I've used to make this video. And there's also a playlist that has all of the videos that I watched, all of the interviews that I'm using clips of and talking about. It's all down there in the Google link. In most of the interviews I watched for especially his hot sauce, it really comes across how little work is being done, and how this kind of applies to Nicola too, that they seem to want these titles of I'm a chef, I'm a director, an actress, but it's not really about actually doing the job. In many of the interviews about Brooklyn's hot sauce, Cloud 23, he's set up by the hosts in really nice ways. Like, a lot of the hosts are serving him really softball questions like, tell me about your process. How did you come up with this sauce? And he just turns around and says, oh, no. I just knocked it up in one night. And he talks about how he was having a conversation with Nicola and she said to him, well, you like hot sauce, why don't you do something with that? Which sounds like he basically was sitting there saying, oh, what can I do? I need something to do. And she suggested hot sauce, and that's what he decided to do.
Can you sort of tell us a little bit about sort of when you had that experience, when you realized that you had something here with Cloud?
Yeah, so like 3 years ago, I was kind of figuring out what I kind of wanted to do. I was trying a bunch of things out. And then one night, like really late, me and my wife were having a bottle of wine in our kitchen really late at night. And my wife was like, you love hot sauce, you love design, why don't you make a hot sauce? So it was kind of, I didn't really think much about it. And then I ordered a bunch of stuff. I watched a quick video on how to make hot sauce and I made it. I made the sweet jalapeno one, that's its original recipe, which we created. Probably then I tried it. And then I was like, and then the next day I woke up, I tried it again. I was like, actually, I kind of want to try and do something with this. Like I had so much fun, doing it. And I just really wanted to kind of create something. And then, was doing my research and, found this kind of white space with, high-end condiments with great ingredients. And I just wanted to create what I thought was the best hot sauce. And then obviously built an amazing team, found a great CEO, and that's kind of how it started.
The rest of the interviews that he does just kind of goes over how he knocked up the hot sauce in one night and he didn't tweak it, didn't change it. It seemed good enough and throw it out there. He does talk a lot more about designing the bottle and wanting to make like the merch and that element of it. Again, it just seems more like a performative thing and being the accolades of, oh, I have a hot sauce, this is the merch, look at the really beautiful bottle. Like, there's way more focus in the interviews on how it looks and the aesthetics and the bottle rather than an actually good product. So I want to go through Brooklyn's statement and kind of address a lot of the major claims made in it and also address some of the conflicting information, what's being said behind the scenes, and then we'll also touch on the Harry and Meghan of it all. This statement was, in my opinion, absolutely not written by Brooklyn. I'm sure it was the essence of what he wanted to say, but I just don't think there's any way he wrote this based on what we've seen from him in the past. I think this was written by this PR team, and I think it will have gone through many drafts, and I think the kind of casualness of it was completely manufactured. The fact that it's written on Notes app in dark mode, I think that was a very purposeful decision by this very expensive PR team. I mentioned earlier, and my opinion is that they've been working on this for quite a while. And I think through the press, you can see all of the groundwork that's been laid for this statement, all of the leaks, all of the briefings. And I think a lot of that groundwork is the reason that I was able to make a video 6 months ago that covered a lot of the points in Brooklyn's statement that at that point were just like rumors and unconfirmed, but they were so dead on. I think there's also been a lot of cleaning up of both Brooklyn and Nicola's images, and a lot of the unflattering articles and things like that have been taken down, videos as well. And I do think it's a pretty big coincidence that this feud is apparently going on for years at this point, and they released the statement, and the next day is when Nicola's new Ryan Murphy series is premiering, where she's starring alongside Ashton Kutcher, who's playing his dream role, the role he wants to play in real life, of a tech billionaire villain. I do just want to be clear about one thing though. Although I think that Nicola absolutely helped with the statement and was involved with the statement the way that you would if you're married to someone, I don't think that she's behind the scenes puppeteering everything Brooklyn does. I don't like this kind of idea that Brooklyn's this poor, innocent, sweet boy that is being completely controlled by Nicola, because at the end of the day, Brooklyn is a grown man, and if he didn't want to put out this statement, if he didn't want to cut off his parents, he wouldn't. So
he's young. He is young.
You can't blame it on his age. And
he's
also,
young and
he
moneyed.
could be getting influenced.
He's young and moneyed, and he's spoilt, really, to be honest. And in fairness, they've supported all his weird crafts, like his sandwiches and his photography.
Do you know what? Someone commented on my Instagram post that I did, and they were like, "Oh God, it's just like Meghan, those women turning these men again." And it's like, no. These are grown-up men, and they're making their own decisions. You cannot just blame the family. But I'd say she did want him to stick up for her.
Was she? Apparently she went out with one of the Hadids, the boy, and when she was going out with him, he didn't speak to his family either.
Stop.
So I don't know what she's doing. And I do think he's probably quite suggestible. I mean, she's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
She's insanely wealthy. He's done very well. And he's a catch too. He has lost track of himself. He has lost the run of himself completely. Yeah. And his complaints are not family cutting off worthy complaints. This is that cut culture I'm telling you about. Everyone's cutting off their families these days.
It's just babyish bullshit. Hop on yourself.
This
is literally the just get an absolute grip and just get a hold of yourself. It just
Rein
it's
your
such.
neck in.
So Brooklyn's statement begins, "I've been silent for years and made every effort to keep these matters private. Unfortunately, my parents and their team have continued to go to the press, leaving me with no choice but to speak for myself and tell the truth about only some of the lies that have been printed. I do not want to reconcile with my family. I'm not being controlled. I'm standing up for myself for the first time in my life. For my entire life, my parents have controlled narratives in the press about our family. The performative social media posts, family events, and inauthentic relationships have been a fixture of the life I was born into." If you see me looking at the computer too, it's just because I'm checking my notes, because the statement is 6 pages long, so it's quite a lot to remember. But I do, just off the bat, I do believe that this is the case. I don't think there's many people who think that the Beckhams don't have a lot of friends in the press, a lot of press briefings leaking, all of that stuff. I do think that the Beckhams' social media is absolutely performative, because newsflash, everyone's social media is performative. The statement then goes on to say, "My mum cancelled making Nicola's dress at the 11th hour, despite how excited she was to wear her design, forcing her to urgently find a new dress weeks before our big day." So here's where we start with kind of the contradictions and things like that, because Nicola had a dress designed by Valentino. I just don't think that this dress story lines up, because there's articles where they've spoken about the dress taking a year to design and how Nicola went to Rome twice, and then there was a fitting in LA, and there was all these phone calls and all of this other stuff, and it just doesn't seem to make sense. Hi guys, Editing Ash and Editing G here. I just wanted to jump in, not for my usual reason of I've forgotten to mention something or I found out more information that I want to add in. I just wanted to rephrase how I talked about the wedding dress thing, because I went off on too long of a tangent and I'm trying to be better at being concise. I know I'm not great at it, but I'm working on it. And so with the wedding dress situation, that has been like a big focus for people and outlets and things. But if you remember a few minutes ago, I talked a lot about like the guest list and all the stuff that came out in the lawsuit. And I mentioned that earlier because to me, that might provide some context as to what happened with the wedding dress fiasco, because the guest list and all of the other things in the lawsuit, all the other fiascos, it's not to me too much of a leap to say maybe that's how the wedding dress situation was being treated. And all of these crazy texts that were coming in, for 12 hours, one every 3 minutes, and this kind of constant just chopping and changing. And then also one day being like, who's going to provide me this thing that would normally take months to sort out? I just think that it really might be as simple as that this person that we know from so many other situations, even outside the lawsuit that we can see in black and white, this person really does seem to fit the stereotype of a billionaire's daughter. And I don't want to stick up for David and Victoria about too many things, but we don't have their side of things, and I'm just looking at the information we do have. I do think that you can't really take away from them that they both are like very hardworking, whether that is for growing their millions or putting out this perfect image. It's still, they are hardworking. And the one other thing that I keep being drawn back to that I just can't get away from is the fact that even if you say the Beckhams only care about Brand Beckham, they only care about how things look, if you would have asked me back like before this wedding and said, if Victoria Beckham doesn't design Nicola's wedding dress, what do you think will happen? I would say, like people will speculate like crazy about why she didn't design it, why she wasn't chosen, is there some kind of feud, yada, yada, yada. If I can see that, I'm sure the Beckhams, who have put out a near perfect image for 30 years and have some of the best PR in the world, I'm sure that they could have foresaw that. And if that's the case, wouldn't they just have done it just for the optics alone? Because I mean, they've done a lot of other things for a lot less. And I just can't imagine, like, I feel like there has to be some reasoning other than, I don't like her, because I just feel like their image alone, they would want to feed into that perfect family, perfect daughter-in-law. So I think that there's probably a multitude of reasons, but I keep being drawn back to that, given the lawsuit, given everything else that we know about Nicola. There's been some other people that aren't really known to jump on and talk badly about celebrities and behind the scenes stuff. And they've been talking about how she does conduct herself and how she behaves and her work ethic and all of that, even though Brooklyn does say that she is the hardest working person that he knows. But maybe he doesn't know a lot of people. But anyway, back to past me. The next bit of the statement says, the night before our wedding, members of my family told me that Nicola was not blood and not family. Since the moment I started standing up for myself with my family, I've received endless attacks from my parents, both privately and publicly, that were sent to the press on their orders. Even my brothers were sent to attack me on social media before they ultimately blocked me out of nowhere last summer. My mum hijacked my first dance with my wife, which had been planned weeks in advance to a romantic love song. In front of our 500 guests, Mark Anthony called me to the stage, where in the schedule was planned to be my romantic dance with my wife, but instead my mum was waiting to dance with me instead. She danced very inappropriately on me in front of everyone. I've never felt more uncomfortable or humiliated in my life. We wanted to renew our vows so we could create new memories of our wedding day that bring us joy and happiness, not anxiety and embarrassment. Despite this, we traveled to London for my dad's birthday and were rejected for a week as we waited in our hotel room trying to plan quality time with him. He refused all our attempts, unless it was at his big birthday with 100 guests and cameras at every corner. When he finally agreed to see me, it was under the conditions that Nicola wasn't invited. It was a slap in the face. Later, when my family traveled to LA, they refused to see me at all. I haven't seen a lot of people mention the blocking thing, and I do think it's pretty significant because it seems like a lie. Because Brooklyn, he says all his family blocked him out of nowhere, and the Beckhams say Brooklyn blocked all of them. And if you block someone on Instagram, say I'm following Sarah Michelle Gellar and she blocks me, I wouldn't be able to follow her anymore. It would like boot me out of being a follower. And say she tagged me in a picture saying, if you see this woman, avoid her, report her to the police, then I would be untagged in that picture. And so if what Brooklyn says is true, that all his family blocked him, they all would have had to have blocked him at the exact same time because they all unfollowed him and were untagged in all of the pictures at the exact same time. So either that happened, and who knows if the Beckhams would have a meeting and all unblock Brooklyn at the same time, or Brooklyn blocked all of them and just went through and blocked them all at the same time. So to me, I think it's much more likely that Brooklyn blocked them all rather than the Beckhams having some meeting and all at the exact same time doing it. But let me know what you think. Regarding the dance situation, I mean, obviously, we haven't seen the dance. We're probably not going to see the dance, so we can't really pass judgment. And I do think that the wording is very intentional with in the schedule. Like, why put that specific thing? Why not just say it was supposed to be? Because according to a number of different sources, including Vogue, actually, who did the wedding pictures, Vogue said that when Brooklyn and Victoria danced, it was much later in the evening, like 11 p.m., and Brooklyn and Nicola had already danced, as had Nicola and her dad, Nelson. And this was apparently like that was what it was supposed to be. Even if maybe it wasn't what was in the schedule, maybe they were like running late or something like that. So I don't know. It is one of those things, I think, that we don't have enough information. So then he says David didn't want to see him unless it was the big birthday party. And, you know, who knows what else was going on at this time. But I imagine that much more than the cameras, it would be that Nicola and Brooklyn wouldn't want to go into the birthday party with all of their friends and family, their dad's friends and family, who know that there are all of these tensions and all of these issues, especially Nicola, who, you know, she's not probably on the best terms with these people. And I think that a very slick PR company would know that hitting on the cameras and all of that is a good point to get some sympathy with people. It's not like Brooklyn and Nicola are, this is going to be the randomest example in the world, but Cody and Janelle's son, Logan from Sister Wives, who, yes, he was brought up in the show and in the spotlight on reality TV, but he hates it and he has nothing to do with the show. He doesn't want to be filmed. He and his wife don't want to be filmed. They don't have a public Instagram. They don't post shit. Brooklyn and Nicola, all they do is post shit on Instagram. All they do is post interviews and stuff. So it's, to me, it seems much more likely they didn't want to go because of the environment and the people rather than cameras. And I also think what he then goes on to say about when he finally agreed, David agreed to see me, it was under the condition that Nicola wasn't invited. And I think it's very key that he says when he, David, finally agreed to see me, maybe he's just saying that because it was David's birthday, But the big party happens and everything, and David obviously posts all these pictures and, you know, the party and all the people, the kids and stuff. And then he posts a picture on Instagram with Cruz and Romeo, his other two sons, and they've gone fishing. And the caption is something like, "All I wanted was to go fishing with my sons on my birthday, and, you know, miss you, Brooklyn," or something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nicola wasn't invited because they were going on this father-son fishing trip. Like, Harper wasn't there, Victoria wasn't there. And so it could be that. I feel like I'm really defending the Beckhams here. Promise I'm not in the business of defending performative multi-millionaires. I think the Beckhams do love their kids, but I really don't like people putting their kids in the spotlight. I don't like family channels and all that stuff. And Brand Beckham is family channels on absolute steroids. But I think that when I read this statement, there was a lot of things that jumped out to me that were red flags, and that just seems a lot like this slick PR team had very specifically chosen certain things to kind of take a dig at that aren't the whole truth on some of them, at least. Like the block thing, like, was it Nicola not invited because it was the son's fishing trip or whatever? And as I said earlier, I think they've given not enough information and too much information at the same time, because usually the advice would be a concise statement, as little information as possible, because if you give more information, people can use that against you. And like, look at what I'm doing, poking holes in, well, what I think are holes in it. And so honestly, when I was reading it, I saw a lot of red flags, but the way they ended the statement, honestly, it was just ridiculous, especially with what they did the day after the statement came out. So they ended the statement by saying, "My family values public promotion and endorsements above all else. Brand Beckham comes first. Family love is decided by how much you post on social media or how quickly you drop everything to show up and pose for a family photo op, even if it's at the expense of our professional obligations. We've gone out of our way for years to show up and support at every fashion show, every party, and every press activity to show our perfect family. But the one time my wife asked for my mum's support to save displaced dogs during the LA fires, my mum refused. The narrative that my wife controls me is completely backwards. I've been controlled by my parents for most of my life. I grew up with overwhelming anxiety, and for the first time in my life since stepping away from my family, that anxiety has disappeared. I wake up every morning grateful for the life I choose and have found peace and relief. My wife and I do not want a life shaped by image, press, and manipulation. All we want is peace, privacy, and happiness for us and our future family." I think it's pretty ridiculous that they posted this statement saying they wanted privacy when anyone would know with one brain cell that this would only absolutely blow it up, especially the way they delivered it, especially with all these little digs. If they really wanted to put something out to be like, "We don't want to reconcile with my family, we're done, we want privacy," you put one or two lines out saying exactly that. All of these little digs and stuff, especially, I know I keep harping on the PR firm, but that is their job. They know exactly what is going to get people's backs up, exactly what is going to get people talking on social media, YouTube videos being made, articles, all of that. They absolutely crafted this to generate exactly what's happening. And the wildest thing is they end that statement saying they want a private life and all of this. And then the very next day, they call the paparazzi on themselves. I mean, you cannot make this up. And I also have seen a lot of other people associate with Nicola in the past coming out, specifically the Hadid family, as Nicola dated Anwar, the brother to Bella and Gigi Hadid, before she dated Brooklyn. And a lot of the family was saying that when Nicola was dating the brother, that the brother was estranged from the family then too. And there also was comments from family members on Instagram saying, oh, it's kind of ridiculous that they're saying they wanted privacy because Nicola Peltz has been trying to be famous for over a decade.
Here's one thing that came up that, do we know them? Yes. Justin Anderson, who has done my hair several times. He was like the main hairstylist for a brand called DP Hue, and they did a bunch of celebrities. He's known for doing Jennifer Aniston's hair, for Miley Cyrus. He was like the blonde hairstylist, basically, known to do a ton of top celebrities. But he did do brunettes as well, and apparently he did Nicola's. And I've never heard him speak out negatively about anyone. Like, he's not super, I mean, he's best friends with Kristen Cavallari, and he's not like trying to get a bunch of attention. Like, I feel like he's just like kind of, I don't know, he like shares his opinions about stuff, but he's not trying to be like
he'd just say something just to get in on the drama. Like, it's not
absolutely not. Like, that's never been the vibe I've gotten from him. So he had first commented on the Best of Bravo Instagram. It was a post about Brooklyn's stories, and he commented on it and said, Brooklyn's wife was one of the worst celebs I've ever worked with. It's her 100%. She's a bad apple, red flag. Everyone knows how close the Beckham family really is. The Best of Bravo responded to him, I guess, but he said, everyone does. They're good to the core. No one will say the same about their daughter-in-law. Big yikes personality, and it's no secret to anyone who's been around her.
Damn. And especially being like a celebrity hairstylist, to put yourself out there saying this, I think that that does say something, because wow, that would be awful if you're lying.
Well, and like, why would he just be saying this about Nicola, but not like any of the huge celebrities that he's ever, like, he's done like so many famous people's hair. So then after that, people started like bugging him more, and then he posted a bunch of stories.
Yes, I'm kind of talking about this because so many of you are DMing me, because I've talked about this specific person before. I've worked with her. Not nice. Not nice. I can say with my full chest, not good energy. Bad news bears. And then, yeah, that bad, based on how many wedding planners she went through, I think she's the issue. I mean, Google her. Google her. Go into Reddit. Go into the dark corners of Reddit.
Don't do that.
Read a little bit about it. Not a good person. So I perked up right when I saw they were getting married. I'm like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to be good for that family. It's not going to be good for that family. Spooky energy. Very spooky energy. I don't even feel bad saying that, because when someone's just so not nice, it always comes out. You can't hide that.
Wow.
So yeah, I do. I feel really bad for them. I do.
Damn, that is.
I know. So he's like very clear that like, no, she's fucking awful.
I put my foot in my mouth when I talked about her years ago. This was so long ago. I was on a podcast and people always ask me about celebrity stuff. And I never talk bad about celebrities because I just don't think it's worth it. If I have a bad experience with a celebrity, I just don't talk about it. I just never talk about them. I never even talk about doing their hair or anything. But in this particular case, she had kind of disappeared. Like, she went away from the scene. She was supposed to be like the new it girl, but like, girls who aren't nice, they kind of disappear. Hollywood doesn't put up with that, right? So she kind of disappeared. So on a podcast, I said her name. I said her name, and then I didn't think about it for years. And then she got married to him, and then it became like a press thing. They talked about, they said like, celebrity hair colorist Justin Anderson says that this person was a nightmare or whatever. And then she's good with PR. She tried to spin it in her own way and try to say that something happened that did not happen, girl, at all, by the way. And I have proof, so let's not go there.
Hi guys, editing Ash and G here, and do not ask why G has an entire blanket back there, but she's in fact using a headphone stand as a pillow. We won't comment on that, but I wanted to jump in here after the girlies, thank you girlies, because I have a few things that I just want to elaborate a bit more on, and also some developments that have happened since I've been making this video. So Nicola and Brooklyn say that the only thing they've ever asked Victoria for, because most of the comments in this statement are directed at Victoria, is to help them with displaced dogs in the LA fires. Nicola and Brooklyn had actually leaked this story to the press almost a year ago, and so for that reason we have exact figures, because it was financial that they asked Victoria for help for, and they didn't even really donate themselves. They started a GoFundMe, and the GoFundMe raised $59,000, which obviously is an insane amount of money, but to be a billionaire heiress, and also Brooklyn, you're starting a GoFundMe. They ended up donating themselves $5,000, which is like a rounding error, probably not even a rounding error in their bank accounts. And that is what you did for the displaced dogs. And then you're putting this in a statement to go after your mom. Like, it seems very odd to me. And the other thing the statement claims is that they want privacy, which, as I mentioned in the video, I do find that hard to believe, considering the way they put the statement out, all the things they mentioned, but also the fact that they've called the paparazzi on themselves a few days after the statement went out. And since I filmed the video, they've done it several more times. And they also have been posting a lot to social media, and you can see their engagement has absolutely exploded since they put out the statement, because prior to the statement their engagement was horrendous, and now it's like 10-12x at least, some of them even higher. And their most recent social media post had them going and staying at this place that actually Harry and Meghan, who we're going to talk about in a sec, they did a lot of interviews at whenever they broke away from the royal family. And Brooklyn and Nicola, when they're staying at this place, they ended up posting pictures of them like in bed, at dinner, drinking wine. And the wine that they are consuming on like a random Wednesday or something in January was over $100,000 combined, those two bottles. So maybe that would have been a great place to get the money for the displaced dogs. But the final thing to mention is that there is a person who's spoken out who was at the wedding, and that is this man called DJ Fat Tony. And he actually is someone who's been friends with the Beckhams for a number of years.
I've done an awful lot of Beckham parties in the past, and they're a very dancey, close-knit family. They love to dance. What we deem as inappropriate is not how Brooklyn feels.
I found this incredible because it is so clear that Brooklyn and Nicola, the Peltzes, Nelson Peltz, whomever actually distributed the NDAs, they have obviously released him from part of the NDA to be able to speak about this, because no one in their right mind would break this NDA. And the way that Tony talks about everything, it is so clear that he has been briefed to discuss certain things and not discuss other things.
So what was she doing?
There was no. I'm not allowed to say slut dropping, but I'm going to say it. There was no slut dropping. There was no.
Because someone just going on to speak about the wedding and answer questions, they wouldn't answer them the way that he does. And he really doesn't say much other than Brooklyn was right. He doesn't go into detail. He doesn't explain anything. It's just kind of like fluffing out what Brooklyn's statement was. All he does is like rule out that Victoria wasn't there in like a black PVC catsuit. And I just, when I listened to the interview, I really was like, this is, I didn't need any more proof, but it was just so obvious that everything he was saying was completely probably briefed by the same PR team who wrote the statement, because a lot of this stuff is throwing out like little bits of information because they know the exact bits of information to throw out to just generate mad discussion.
It's taken a lot for someone to go to social media to post it. He wanted to change the narrative. For the last 4 years, he's been Nepo Baby. For all of his life, he's been called Nepo Baby.
Of course, I've left the link to the interview down below, because if I play the entire 20-minute thing, most of it is just nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It's just repeating the same stuff that's in the statement. But I'll leave the whole thing linked down below because it is a masterclass in saying nothing. But even when they ask him, like, what was it that Victoria did with the dance? He even says it wasn't inappropriate. It was that Brooklyn feels it's inappropriate, and it was the timing.
But why didn't he take that 8-page statement and send it to his parents?
He's done all that.
He sent that
listen,
8-page
he's spoken
statement
to them, and this is, it got to the point for him where he can't take this anymore.
I do find it strange also that they say that this was supposed to be the first dance, and there are pictures that I've shown you in this video of Brooklyn and Nicola having their first dance, and you can see in that picture from Vogue it's daylight, because the pictures at night, they look different, even though they're in like a big like marquee or something. And you can see the picture of Nicola and Brooklyn dancing it's daylight. There's a picture of David and Harper dancing and it's daylight, and that's what Vogue reported too, that Brooklyn and Nicola had their first dance, and then David and Harper came out, and everybody else joined in then. And you can also see Nicola and Nelson Peltz, her dad, having the father-daughter dance. And I just don't think that this interview was anything other than, again, firing it up, getting more discussion and stuff like that. And the way that Tony speaks, I mean, all he says is Brooklyn feels, Brooklyn said, Brooklyn thought, Brooklyn did. You've clearly been briefed by him and his team, because why else would you know this very intimate information and like how he feels and thinks? Because it's not like Brooklyn and DJ Fat Tony are best friends that are like going and getting coffee and he's pouring his heart out and telling him this. I mean, I just think that there's no way that this interview was done other than with not only the explicit permission of Nicola and Brooklyn, but in my opinion, it seems as though it was done for their benefit and possibly at their behest. So I'm going to throw it back to Past Me now to discuss the Harry and Meghan of it all, because there's also some interesting developments going on with Brooklyn specifically that he's been offered that is in a very, very similar boat to what Harry did when he removed himself from the royal family. So back to Past Me. And a lot of people, of course, have compared the asking for privacy situation to Harry and Meghan, which I actually think is a little bit of an unfair comparison because, again, I said this way earlier that Harry and Meghan, they aren't the kids of billionaires and they do have very high security costs. So yes, like, there's still the same sort of criticisms that you can give both, but I think that there's even more criticism with Brooklyn and Nicola. And speaking of the Harry and Meghan of it all, it's not just the privacy situation that people are comparing the two. It's the fact that it's an overly privileged son of a very famous British family that's married an American actress and then ends up estranging themselves from their family and speaking out about it. In the same way, I think it's a little bit different with the money situation. I do think it's a little bit different with Harry and Meghan and Brooklyn and Nicola because of the fact that Harry is from the royal family. And yes, like Brooklyn was born a Beckham, but you can't really completely exit the royal family the same way that you could exit the Beckhams. Like Brooklyn could do a Jeanette McCurdy or any of these other, like Mara Wilson, all these other child actors that just are like, I'm done. I don't want to play this game anymore. Whereas Harry, no matter what, he's the son of the king. You can't really erase that. It's just like Andrew. He doesn't use his titles, but he was the second son of the last monarch. Like, you can't remove that. It's the same way that Archie and Lilibet, Harry and Meghan's kids, when King Charles acceded to the throne, they became prince and princess no matter what, because they are the grandkids of the reigning monarch. All of this stuff is in letter patents and law. It's not something, especially when they're by blood, that you can remove. I talk about all that title stuff in my video about Andrew, and I also mentioned in that video that one of my immediate family members is very close with one of Harry's best friends, and this is someone who, like, when you Google who are Harry's best friends, this person comes up and there's like articles about him and stuff. So when I talk about some of this Harry and Meghan stuff, that's where like I'm drawing some of the information from. But as I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the Beckhams have been friends with the royals for a very long time and friends with pretty much most of the principal royals. They have even been allowed to throw their daughter's birthday party at royal residences. David and Victoria went to William and Kate's wedding, and they went to Harry and Meghan's wedding. And most recently, David Beckham was knighted, despite the fact that several years ago, he called the honors committee, who are the people that decide about the knighthoods, ungrateful, which is just one of the best things that he's ever done. And honestly, I think that that helped his sort of relationship with the public, because they were like, yeah, fair enough. But with the Harry and William fallout, David and Victoria did side with William and Kate, which, I mean, isn't surprising. William's the future king. And it seems like Harry and Meghan have bonded with Nicola and Brooklyn recently and become friends over this whole situation with the families and falling out with David and Victoria, and then also with the comparisons to the situations they're in. There might be some more comparisons coming up with Harry and Brooklyn, because I know for a fact that Brooklyn has been offered multiple book deals, and it will be interesting to see whether he chooses to do one or not. I can't imagine what would come out in that. Who knows if he'll do it though, because like I said, the difference kind of between Harry and Meghan and Nicola and Brooklyn is that Nicola and Brooklyn don't have to do anything for money. I think overall this is just a really sad situation. I think it's sad that there is a family estrangement, and I definitely don't think this is the last we've heard of this. Honestly, if anything, Brooklyn and Nicola have kind of assured that they're asked about this for the foreseeable future at least. I'm sure they'll come out with some sort of blanket rule of not asking them about it in articles or interviews, and I'm sure David and Victoria will do something similar. David was at Davos and there was someone like outside who asked him about it, and he just like kind of walked past and ignored it.
David, do you have a message for Brooklyn this morning? David, you disappointed family business is being aired in public?
Tried to do the same with my children to educate them. They make mistakes. Children are allowed to make mistakes. That's how they learn. So that's what I try to teach my kids. But you have to sometimes let them make those mistakes as well.
David and Victoria do share very little about them actually and their life. Like, it's all that very curated stuff. And honestly, most of what they share is these very like big events. Like Victoria got a big French honor the other day, and so it's like pictures of like events like that, and most of their stuff is sponsorships and ads. I do think it is hilarious that Victoria Beckham's single is now #1, Innocent Girl, because if I could think of something that is absolutely like the most typical British reaction to this, it would be something like that. I don't think David and Victoria will say anything. If they do, it will be very like, we love our son and there's always a place in our hearts for him and we hope he comes back, or something like that. I think they'll continue with their highly curated family front and center, and I think they'll have the other two sons with their girlfriends front and center at a lot of events for the future. It was Emma Bunton's birthday, like just after the statement came out, and at the party and online, you really saw the Spice Girls like rally around Victoria, as they also know that's a way to garner like a lot of good attention. I think they would have posted a picture of them all together at Emma's birthday anyway, but I feel like it's probably even more important that stuff like that gets posted. There have been rumors that the Spice Girls are going to do a reunion this year in 2026. I've even heard something about a performance at the Sphere in Las Vegas. Victoria Beckham has said many times that she's glad she did the reunion in 2007, 2008, and her kids got to like see her be a pop star, but she realized that that world wasn't for her anymore when she did that tour. And that's why when the Spice Girls did the 2019 reunion, she wasn't there. The 2007, 2008, that was her end, although the last performance together was the opening of the London 2012 Olympics, and it was a really fantastic performance. I think if the Spice Girls did do a reunion this year, based on everything she said from the past, Victoria Beckham wouldn't be part of it, but even if she wasn't, it would garner so much positive publicity for all 5 of them, and talking about the past and like playing all the old songs and stuff. So it would do a lot of good for her and like burying some of the discussion about this. But what would be really smart is if she didn't want to do like the whole reunion, but she did like one performance with them, even like the opening night, or if they're going to do like a couple of weeks of shows, do the last one. That would absolutely, like, people would go crazy. And that would be all anyone would be really talking about when it came to her name, certainly for a while anyway. I have so much more I could say. I could talk about this for days, honestly, but if anything else significant happens, I will either post on my Instagram, like when the statement came out, I initially posted a little video on my Instagram, or I am planning on posting on my new other channel, Coffee, Cults and Cats, soon. I do want to do videos like this, like updates on other topics or trending topics, or topics like I don't have enough for like a channel video. So if you want to follow me over there, I'll leave that channel link below, and I'll also leave my and G's Instagram link down below as well. I do really want to do a behind the scenes of the Spice Girls video, so that could also cover some updates as well. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. Thank you so much as always for watching. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. Make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and G and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye, guys.